Chapter 443. Not to mention, Kuang Yi didn't know that Yang Qindong had a large warehouse and many powerful weapons from hundreds of years later. He didn't think highly of Yang Qindong just from the number of troops. Even if he believed that this army could fight, it shouldn't be like this. From this point of view, Ying Zong didn't have any sincerity at all, not to mention asking for Bai Ming's approval. That was even more impossible. Think about it, the southern Ming had internal strife. What did it have to do with Bai Ming? They couldn't wait to see a joke. In order to solve the problem, Ying Zong wanted their approval to be bestowed the title of king. This was simply unrealistic. Just like when Mu Bin was bestowed the title of king of Shiping, why didn't he say anything to Bai Ming? Now that Yang Qindong was about to be bestowed the title of king, he remembered everything. If this wasn't artificial difficulties, then what was? Of course, these were all Kuang Ye's thoughts. As a subject of the Great Ming, he couldn't question the emperor's decision. Now, he was thinking about how to explain this matter to Yang Qindong clearly. He wasn't even sure if Yang Qindong would be angry and make things difficult for him if he read this decree. Others definitely wouldn't, but when it came to Yang Qindong, everything was possible. Kuang Yi couldn't make up his mind, so he called Guan Ying, Ma Wei, and Yu Guang over. He first showed them the emperor's decree, then asked with a helpless expression, "Do the three generals have any ideas?" After the three of them read it, their expressions became very ugly. They could clearly see that Ying Zong didn't want to be bestowed the title of king. However, they were just some insignificant or border officials. What ideas could they have? Just like this, the three of them were silent for a long time. When Kuang Yi was a little impatient, Guan Ying carefully said, "Teacher, this matter should be discussed with the Duke of Loyalty and see if there are any other conditions. As for the location, I think Gaozhou City is more suitable." The reason why Guan Ying said this was because he had the same thought as Kuang Yi. He was also afraid that Yang Qindong would suddenly attack. It was different in the city. After all, this was their territory. Even if they wanted to make a move, the other party would have some scruples. Yes. Kuang Yi nodded. He understood Guan Ying's meaning and said, "Since that's the case, you should personally go to the mercenary camp. Regardless of whether you can meet the Duke of Loyalty or not, just tell him that you want to discuss this matter." "I understand." Guan Ying nodded. Cold Front Barracks. Zhu Qizhen's decision regarding Ying Zong had been sent over yesterday. With a powerful eunuch like Mao Mu in the palace and the fact that this matter was not a secret to begin with, he had informed the Xianxia Security Bureau personnel in the city. Yang Qindong, who had received this information a day earlier, let out a long sigh after reading it. He knew that he had underestimated the situation. He was different from Mu Bin. Yang Qindong knew this very well. Mu Bin had only lived in Yunnan for a long time and his influence was limited there. Moreover, most of the soldiers under his command belonged to the Imperial court. In other words, if he made any strange moves, those soldiers might not listen to him. However, he was different. He had the most elite mercenary army in the world. That was an existence that everyone was afraid of. In addition, when he was in Bai Ming, he had the ability to overthrow the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. This kind of influence was not something that a mere Mu family could achieve. It was precisely because his influence was not limited to one place that it was normal for Zhu Qizhen to be on guard against him. Under such circumstances, how could Zhu Qizhen give him the title of king? If it were someone else, if he was not given the title of king, he would withdraw his troops. In any case, his headquarters was in Bai Ming. Now, Bai Ming was still very safe. At worst, he could just return to Yang village and do whatever he wanted with the outside world. However, Yang Qindong's goal was set long ago. He could not let go of this no matter what. Especially since this war involved Jiaoji. Jiaoji was definitely a foreign race. He could not allow the foreign race to oppress and invade the Han people. In other words, regardless of whether Ying Zong agreed to give him the title of king or not, he would not give him even the slightest benefit. If he had to send troops, he would still send troops. A bitter smile appeared on Yang Qindong's face as he felt like he was being held hostage. Then he comforted himself and said, "Forget it, no matter what, this time I've expressed my wish. When the time is right, I'll probably be bestowed the title of king." After consoling himself, Yang Qindong began to wait for Kuang Yi to talk to him. Although he could not be bestowed the title of king, he still wanted the benefits. He could not expect him to go to war without paying anything. This wait did not take long. On the second day, Guan Ying came. After seeing Tiger's mane, he told him that the minister wanted to meet with the Duke of Loyalty. He also said that he would be waiting for him in the city. Tiger's mane naturally did not agree immediately. He only said that he would report this matter to the young master. As for whether he would go or not, it was not up to him to decide. After Guan Ying left, Tiger's mane told Yang Chendong about the matter. The sixth young master laughed heartily. This Kuang Yi is also afraid of death. He actually asked me to meet him in the city. He is afraid that I will flip out. Hee. Seeing that even the Minister of War was intimidated by the young master's reputation, Hu Mang naturally had a smile on his face, as if he had something to do with honor. Well, if that is the case, how about we give him face? Not only do we have to go, but we also have to go quickly. We have to act as if we are in a hurry. Only by doing this can we get more benefits. Yang Chendong quickly made a decision. He had to act as if he did not know anything. This way, when he heard the news, he would flip out. No matter what he said or did, others would be able to understand. Yang Chendong wanted to enter the city for negotiations. Tiger's mane immediately went to arrange it. Although there should not be any danger, at this time, the young master's safety was definitely the most important thing in Xianxia. There was no room for carelessness. He immediately gathered a total of 60 people from the first and second guards to be responsible for the young master's close safety. Then, he mobilized a company of elites, the Cold Front, to be responsible for the periphery. In addition, he had the Wolf Fang Special Forces and the Ghost Sniper team to secretly cooperate with him. Just like how Kuang Yi was guarding against Yang Chendong, how could they not be on guard against each other? After doing these things, Tiger's mane reported the situation to Yang Chendong. He just nodded slightly to show that he understood and did not say anything. This was the concern of his subordinates. Of course he had to accept it. After all, if something really happened to him, then the world would really be in chaos. When Tiger's mane reported, as the first wife Hu Yan, was tidying up Yang Chendong's clothes. They had been married for more than a year, and Hu Yan had completed the transformation from a little girl to a qualified wife. Her behavior was more natural and graceful. From a girl in the Hu family to Yang Chendong's wife, Hu Yan did not feel too uncomfortable. Of course, this was because of Yang Chendong's protection, but at the same time, it was also because there were no parents-in-law. Without anyone to control her, she could obtain the greatest power as soon as she came in. When she did things, naturally, she did not have to worry too much. It had been smooth sailing, especially after Yang Chendong treated her very well after marriage. This made Hu Yan very satisfied. Even so, she still had a regret in her heart. That was, after such a long time, she was still not pregnant with her husband's flesh and blood. In this era, there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and the worst was to have no descendants. One could imagine how much pressure she was under. If it were not for Yang Chendong repeatedly emphasizing that now was the time of war, and the environment was not conducive to having children, and if it were not for the other 3 wives who were also not pregnant, she was afraid that she would not have been able to resist. Naturally, Hu Yan did not know that the lack of children was partly caused by Yang Chendong. He did his best to take various measures in the bedroom. Of course, it was not that he did not want children, but for the sake of the wives. He remembered reading a book in his later life, which said that the best age for a woman to conceive was between the ages of 22 and 23. At that time, a woman's body was at its best. Now, none of the wives were over 20, so he was not in a hurry. Of course, if they were really pregnant by accident, he would be very happy and attach great importance to it. She carefully helped Yang Chendong put on the iconic set of green clothes, and looked around. When she was sure that everything was fine, Hu Yan nodded with satisfaction. Yes, my 6th son is handsome. Haha, don't praise yourself like this. Listening to Hu Yan's sigh, Yang Chendong could not help but be happy. Even if he had a calm heart, it made him very happy to be praised by the person he loved. Seeing that Yang Chendong seemed to be in a good mood, Hu Yan opened her mouth, but did not say anything. Yang Chendong saw her hesitant look. What's wrong? Is there anything that can't be said between us? Since Yang Chendong asked, Hu Yan said with some embarrassment, 6th son, it's like this. We also want to enter the city to have a look. Sister Shui has mentioned this to me twice, but considering that you have been busy, she did not mention it. Today, you enter the city and take us in to have a look. Don't worry, we know what to do and will bring guards with us. Besides, with Tai Qingyi and the others, no one will be blind enough to provoke us. It was no wonder that Hu Yan would have such a request. After all, she was a woman who was not even 20 years old. At first, she was excited and curious about staying in the military camp every day. But after a long time, it was inevitable that she would feel bored. Therefore, a while ago, 3rd Madame Shui had asked if she could go to Gaozhou Prefecture. Considering that she did not want to cause trouble for her husband, Hu Yan refused. However, seeing that Yang Qindong was going to enter the city today, she wondered if she should go with him. After all, not only did she want to go, but so did Sister Shui. Even if it was for Sister Shui's sake, she should say this idea. Chapter 444. It's been hard on you. As soon as Hu Yan spoke, Yang Qindong understood the problem and nodded. Then let's go into the city and take a look. Tiger's Mane, tell Tai Qingyi and the others to prepare. Also, assign the first guard to the 2 madams. It's better not. Captain Tai and the others are enough. The first guard should stay by your side. Hu Yan said with a look of refusal. It's okay. The second guard has been trained long ago. Captain Dao Shao has complained to me more than once that they have the ability to shoulder the burden alone. Now, let's give them a chance. Besides, as long as Kuang Ye's head is not kicked by a donkey, they will definitely not dare to make things difficult for me. Ha ha. Hearing Yang Qindong's last witty words, Hu Yan covered her mouth and chuckled. She knew that her husband was doing this for her own good and also showing his concern, so she agreed. Okay, then I will tell Sister Shui the good news and make her happy. After Hu Yan finished speaking, she really left the tent. When she left, her face was very happy. Looking at this scene, Yang Qindong could not help but sigh. It was good to be young. Yang Qindong was still very satisfied with the relationship between the madams, but he also knew that it could not be like this forever. Once they were older, their thoughts would be more mature. Once they had children, conflicts of interest would naturally appear. Once he really created something big, it would be a question of who would inherit and how much would be inherited. At that time, it would be impossible for them to be as close as they were now. But after thinking about it, Yang Qindong quickly shook his head. That was still a very distant matter. There was no need to think so much now. It was better to think about the meeting with Kuang Yi first. After receiving the information about Nanjing yesterday, Yang Qindong knew that after being disappointed, he also understood his position in Zhu Qizhen's heart. Others could be crowned king, but he could not. It seemed that Zhu Qizhen was very afraid of him. In other words, he had already formed such an impression in the other party's heart. It would be very difficult or even impossible to change it. Even if he disbanded the mercenaries now, it would only be a temporary peace. It would be impossible for him to live in peace forever. Once they seized the opportunity and created something that could be used against them, it would be the time for the army to be locked up. In the final analysis, Yang Qindong had already seen that Zhu Qizhen would not tolerate him after testing him with the king bestowment request. Since that was the case, there was no need for him to harbor any illusions. He would directly reveal his powerful side. Even if it was to protect himself, for the safety of his family and loved ones, he had to have sufficient strength. Of course, even after going through all these, Yang Qindong's strategy still hadn't changed. That was to surround them but not attack. Even though the great Ming dynasty was divided into the north and the south, the majority of the commoners still managed to get by. During the early Ming dynasty, the economy recovered and developed through the Hongwu, Jiangwen, and Yongle dynasties. During the Ranzong and Xuanzong dynasties, the economy prospered. During the Mingren dynasty, they stopped purchasing and redressed grievances. They paid tribute to the commoners and shared benefits with the commoners. They ordered for the troops to be stopped and for the commoners to be raised. They also stopped the treasure ships from going to the Western Ocean and stopped the royal family from purchasing jewels. These actions eased the social conflicts and allowed the commoners to recover. Productivity was developed, opening up a stable and prosperous era. After Ming Xuanzong ascended the throne, he quickly quelled the Han King Zhu Gaoxiu's rebellion and continued the Mingren dynasty's ruling philosophy. He implemented a policy of focusing on agriculture, helping the poor and punishing corruption. He continued to use the three yangs, helping the commoners, helping the poor and punishing corruption. This caused the Ming dynasty to be stable and the economy to develop quickly. During their reign, the government was clear and the laws were strict. The economy developed, the commoners lived in peace, and the society was stable. It formed the peaceful scene of the early Ming dynasty. The later generations called it the rule of Renxian, which was comparable to the Zhou dynasty's rule of Chengkong, the Han dynasty's rule of Wenjing, and the Tang dynasty's rule of Zhenguan. If it wasn't for Zhu Zhangji passing away in the 10th year of Xuanda, 1435, he would have died at the age of 38. If the rule of Renxian ended like that, even if Yang Qindong came here and brought the large warehouse with him, it would be very difficult for him to achieve anything. Facing the great Ming dynasty, which had a strong economy and military, if Yang Qindong wanted to do something, it would be the same as going against the development of society, and he wouldn't be able to win the hearts of the people. It was because the great Ming dynasty's foundation was too good that even after the defeat of Tu Mu and the chaos in the south, the great Ming dynasty's foundation was still there. Many people were still loyal to the imperial court. Especially in the hearts of the commoners, the great Ming dynasty was still very strong and was worth relying on. Under such an environment, even if Yang Qindong could take down the southern Beiming emperor and rule the imperial court, it was inevitable that the commoners would complain. There would even be many people who would rise up against him. If that was the case, then the Han people would fight amongst themselves. This was definitely not something that Yang Qindong wanted to see. He still wanted to lead them to unify the world. In the future, they would feel extremely proud to be born into a Han family. Just like the Americans in the future, they were arrogant wherever they went. In other countries, if something happened to the Americans, the local government's attention would be completely different. This was the benefit that strength brought to the commoners. Yang Qindong pursued an existence that was higher than the Americans. The place that he wanted to conquer was too big, and he needed countless pure Han people to rule it. Once the consumption in the great Ming dynasty was too great, even if he had the territory, there would be no reliable people to manage it. With this, he couldn't start a civil war in the great Ming dynasty's territory, where the Han people lived for a long time. Thinking of this, Yang Qindong shook his head lightly. He believed that Zhu Qizhen definitely didn't know about his thoughts. Not only him, but other people also didn't know. They didn't even dare to think about it. However, it was undeniable that although Zhu Qizhen didn't know what he was thinking, this kind of pressure made him unable to fight back and could only admit defeat. Of course, while helplessly admitting defeat, Yang Qindong also had to actively ask for benefits. As long as it wasn't too excessive, the other party would definitely agree. Since they wanted him to work hard, it would be unreasonable to not give him any benefits. Young master, everything is ready. We can set off. Tiger's Mane once again entered the tent to ask for instructions. Let's go. Yang Qindong agreed and strode out of the tent. Gaozhou City. Although there were nearly 70,000 Miao soldiers stationed not far from the city, order in the city was still carried out in an orderly manner under Kuang Yi and the others' appeasement. This was the advantage of having a capable minister. For example, Kuang Yi, although he was the Minister of War, but in fact, his ability to manage the area was very strong. This kind of all-round talent was also what the emperor liked. If he met a famous monarch, there would be more room for development. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for Kuang Yi being too old and his thinking being too rigid, even Yang Qindong would have wanted to tie him up and send him to Qiqian City to be modified for his own use. Under the city tower of Gaozhou City, the city gate was opened. It was no longer closed like before. However, unlike before, when the city gate was opened, the citizens couldn't casually leave the city. There were only a few Ming soldiers guarding here. Along with them were Kuang Yi, Guan Ying, Ma Wei, Yu Guang and the others. The reason they appeared here was naturally to welcome Yang Qindong. When they saw the army in camouflage from afar, Kuang Yi and the others tidied up their official robes and looked forward with anticipation. This time, although Yang Qindong's wish of being named king did not come true, this did not affect Kuang Ye's view of him. In their hearts, if there was anyone who could resolve the crisis in the southwest of the southern Ming Empire, it would definitely be Yang Qindong. However, the emperor did not agree to being named king. As the Minister of War, Kuang Yi could only obey. While taking advantage of today's opportunity to send the imperial edict, he also hoped to persuade Yang Qindong to focus on the overall situation. Even if the emperor didn't promise him, if he had a good performance, it might not be impossible for him to be crowned as a prince. Of course, Even Kuang Yi himself did not have confidence in such a conversation. Even though he was the Minister of War and had the position of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, a lower rank one official, when he saw the iconic luxurious carriage arrive, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Although Yang Chendong was only 21 years old, in Kuang Ye's heart, he was someone of the same generation. This was because this person was too smart. When discussing matters with such a person, it was better to avoid all petty tricks. It was better to be more sincere and perhaps get a good result. The luxurious carriage was getting closer and closer. When it was 300 meters away from Gaozhou City's gate, a company of elites had already rushed forward and took over the city's defense. After discovering that there was no danger, they made a gesture to signal that it was safe. Then, the luxurious carriage continued forward until it arrived in front of Kuang Yi and the others. When Kuang Yi saw how careful Yang Chendong was, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He knew that this was not because Yang Chendong was afraid that he would set a trap. Yang Chendong just wanted to use this method to tell him that their relationship was not as close as before. Even if he wanted to make a request, he should have some sense of propriety. In the end, the carriage stopped in front of Kuang Yi and the others. Then, the tall beta Persei stretched out and opened the carriage's curtains. Then, Yang Chendong, dressed in green, walked out. Compared to the Yang Chendong he saw a while ago, this time, his complexion was much rosier and he seemed to be more energetic. Of course, it was not comparable to when he was at his best. But the more he looked like he had just recovered from a serious illness, the more it could be used as proof that he had indeed been seriously ill before. Chapter 445. Congratulations. Duke Zhongdang's body seems to be much better. Seeing Yang Chendong walk out of the carriage in such a state, Kuang Yi cupped his fist and laughed, wanting to use this opportunity to get closer to him. That's right. It's all thanks to the mercy of the Imperial Secret Service. Otherwise, I'm afraid this duke would be long gone from this world. Yang Chendong didn't laugh. Instead, he replied very seriously. As soon as he said this, the faces of Guaning and the others on the opposite side changed greatly, becoming extremely red. Yang Chendong was poisoned by the embroidered uniform guard. This was something that the deceased embroidered uniform guard, Wei Guang, had personally admitted. Therefore, even if Yang Chendong's words were like nails, Guaning and the others had no right to object. They could only lower their heads and not say a word. Fortunately, Kuang Yi was still there. This good official of several dynasties, his ability to adapt was quite strong. He said with a serious face, "This old man has already reported to the emperor about the embroidered uniform guard's audacity to secretly harm a meritorious official. The embroidered uniform guard has already been punished, and a few of them have been removed from their positions. This can be considered the emperor giving justice to Duke Zhongdang." This matter was not something that Kuang Yi was talking nonsense, it really happened. However, only Zhu Qizhen himself knew whether those who had been removed from their positions had truly lost their power, or if they were just putting on an act. Yang Chendong, who also received the news, heard Kuang Ye's words. His originally serious face had a trace of a smile, then he cupped his fist towards the direction of Nanjing and said, "Then this duke thanks the emperor for his kindness." There was not much respect in his words. If there were other eunuchs present, it would be inevitable for them to scold him. However, in Kuang Ye's eyes, all of this could not be more normal. What? He had suffered a little grievance, and he was not happy to say a few words to vent it. As long as Yang Chendong was happy and was willing to help the southern Ming Empire, which was in dire straits, it didn't matter how harsh the words were. Furthermore, Yang Chendong hadn't even said anything. He was just being a little disrespectful. Speaking of which, the word respect should be kept in one's heart and not spoken out loud. Who did not know how to say nice words? Would words like that really count? Kuang Yi had his own judgment, so at this moment, he did not show anything. Instead, he generously made a gesture to the people behind him. Yang Chendong did not stand on ceremony and walked side by side with Kuang Yi. The two of them chatted and laughed as they walked towards the capital of Gaozhou. Naturally, there were hundreds of elites of Lung Feng following behind him. This time, for the sake of safety, Tiger's Mane allowed each of them to bring 2 basic sets of ammunition, which was 400 rounds per person. In addition, there were 5,000 to 6,000 rounds of ammunition in total. With such strength, even if the southern Ming army in the city wanted to do something bad, they would not be able to get any benefits. Not to mention, Yang Chendong had a large warehouse in his hands. How many rounds of ammunition and advanced weapons could he not take out? They entered the city, followed by Hu Yan and Lady Shui in the luxurious carriage. Tai Qingyi, the captain of the guards, led 20 female soldiers in the first guard, Qiu V's team of 30 people, a total of 50 guards, into the city. With such a team, as long as they did not encounter a large-scale enemy, there would not be any safety issues. Once something happened, as long as they could hold on for a short while, reinforcements would arrive immediately, and their safety would be guaranteed. As women, they naturally liked rouge and face powder very much. As Yang Chendong's wives, they already had all kinds of new cosmetics that could not be seen outside provided by the cosmetics factory in Qian City. However, since they were used to shopping in rouge shops since they were young, since they entered the city, it was necessary for them to make a trip there. It was just like how many people were used to eating big fish and big meat, so it was not bad to have a few light side dishes occasionally. Gaozhou Prefecture had experienced the chaos of the Huang bandits and was now surrounded by the Miao army. It was impossible to say that the business was not affected at all. Just like the current Gaozhou Prefecture city, because it was too troublesome to transport things in from the outside world, it caused the prices of goods in the city to skyrocket. Even businesses like rouge shops that weren't absolutely necessary were greatly affected. The prices were more than 4 to 5 times higher than normal, causing many young ladies and madams in the city to be unable to patronize them. However, this was not a problem for Hu Yan and Lady Shui. Along the way, Yang Chendong had instructed Lang Feng to take anything that didn't belong to anyone. He wasn't courteous at all. Although Zhu Qizhen did not give them a single coin for military expenses, just by eliminating the Huang bandits, they had already robbed a lot of spoils of war. For example, when Gao Xiong left with the navy last time, just the gold and silver alone was more than 15 million taels, and this did not include the house deeds, land deeds, and some antiques and paintings. It was impossible for them to take all the money away. Yang Chendong had a lot of gold and silver with him. As a madam, it was not a problem for him to be generous. That was why Hu Yan and Madame Shui dared to step into the store. After the two madams entered the rouge shop, Qiu Vi and 30 guards completely controlled the entire street outside the shop to ensure that no one came to disturb the two madams. Not only the front door of the rouge shop was guarded, but the back door was also guarded. Badao Jiang and Pang Yu of the first guard team were arranged to guard here. Although they were not protecting the sixth young master this time, the two madams' identities were equally important. Badao Jiang and Pang Yu did not have the slightest intention of relaxing. When they arrived at the back door of the rouge shop, they saw a black shadow seem to have floated in. The reason why they said that the shadow had floated in was because the person was so fast that Pang Yu did not see it clearly. He did not even know if it was an illusion in front of his eyes. What kind of person was Pang Yu? He grew up in the mountains and dealt with all kinds of wild beasts. After many years of hunting, he was very sensitive to danger. Brother Ba, did you see a shadow enter the backyard just now? Pang Yu was not sure if he saw a person or not, so he cautiously asked Badao Jiang, who was in charge of guarding the back door with him. Badao Jiang was good at endurance, especially when it came to fist techniques. However, when it came to eyesight, he was still not good enough. In response to Pang Yu's question, he asked in confusion, "Why do you say that? Did you see anything?" After these days of contact, they understood each other very well and knew where Pang Yu's advantages were. After saying that, Badao Jiang's expression changed. "Brother Pang, are you going to say that you saw someone enter the shop from the back door?" "It was a little blurry. I didn't see it clearly," Pang Yu, who was asked, answered in an uncertain tone. "You didn't see it clearly? Does that mean someone went in?" Badao Jiang was a straightforward person. Thinking of his responsibility, he immediately turned around and rushed into the back door after saying that. "Brother Ba? I'm not sure if it's the same person." Pang Yu saw Badao Jiang's eagerness and could not help but shout anxiously. What he saw was Badao Jiang's back and his voice coming from afar. "Mistress's safety is more important than anything. It's not wrong to go in and have a look, whether or not someone is there." After shouting these words, Badao Jiang's figure was getting farther and farther away. Pang Yu did not think about anything else. He put the 9-5 style behind him and strode after him. After Hu Yan and Madame Shui entered, the rouge shop quickly became lively, especially when Tai Qingyi entered with 20 valiant female soldiers in camouflage uniforms. Seeing this, the proprietress of the shop came out to welcome them. Most of the people who ran the rouge shop were women. Otherwise, it would be inconvenient to communicate with them. The proprietress of the shop was a woman in her 40s. Looking at her complexion, one could tell that she must have been beautiful when she was young. "Oh, our esteemed guest has arrived. Apologies for not going out to meet you. Take a good look. Our Lou's Rouge shop is an old brand. It's one of the best in the entire Gaozhou prefecture." The lady boss had a smile on her face as she spoke as if they were close friends. Hu Yan and Lady Shui were used to big occasions, so they didn't have any stage fright. They smiled and went to the counter under the guidance of the landlady. Then, they looked at the colorful makeup products. Tai Qingyi followed the two matriarchs closely and looked around from time to time. However, just as he took 2 steps forward, he heard a female soldier reprimanding him. "Who are you? Get out!" Just this shout alone attracted at least 3 nearby female soldiers to come over. Even though they were all women, they had all undergone strict training in Crimson City. The one who trained with them was the most elite, Lang Feng. Therefore, their skills were not any weaker than Lang Feng's. It was just that their strength was lacking. Under the shout, an unprepossessing man had already pulled out a sharp dagger from his waist and rushed in the direction of the counter. The man's speed was very fast and his strength was even greater. Just by getting close to her, he had already pushed the female soldier who had first noticed him and called out to him to the side. When the flying figure landed, it directly smashed a wooden chair that was meant for guests to rest on into smithereens. However, what the man did not expect was that after he pushed one person away, another woman rushed in from the front, left and right. Instantly, the situation became 1 against 3. Women? Why are there so many women? He spoke awkwardly in the Central Plains language. Then, he raised his knife and slashed at the 3 women in front of him. All of this happened too quickly. The 3 female soldiers were caught off guard. The saber slashed the arm of one of the female soldiers, causing a stream of blood to spurt out. Chapter 446. With one successful move, the man flew up and kicked at the other female soldier. He thought it would be easy for him to hurt another person with this quick kick. However, he didn't expect that the person in front of him would move. His kick missed, and because he used too much strength, he almost fell to the ground. Taking advantage of his movement, the 3 female soldiers, together with the female soldier whose arm was injured, surrounded him again. It seemed that they would never let him take a step forward. At such a close distance, it was not a wise move to fire a gun. It was easy to hurt their companions. So the 3 women used their fists and feet. They cooperated with each other and surrounded the man in the middle. Their fists and feet were like raindrops as they smashed towards the center. At this moment, another 4 female soldiers rushed in from the side, as if they were going to help the 3 women. The other 13 female soldiers and Captain Tai Qingyi surrounded Hu Yan and Madame Shui tightly to protect them. The fight in the store soon attracted the attention of Captain Qiu Vi, who was guarding the front door. At this moment, he had already rushed in through the front door with 4 sturdy guards and stepped into the Rouge store. The timely appearance of Qiu Vi and the others made the man, who had been punched and kicked countless times, lose all hope of assassinating them. He had thought that the success rate of killing 2 women would be very high. However, it seemed that he had underestimated them. Since that was the case, he decided to run away. Where there was life, there was hope. Once the man had made up his mind, he decisively swung the dagger in front of him and threw it toward the counter. This alerted the enemy and caused the 7 female guards surrounding him to rush toward the counter. They would not forget that there were 2 matriarchs there. The dagger flew through the air like an arrow. However, just as it was about to reach the counter, Tai Qingyi jumped up and grabbed it in midair. His voice was heard before his body landed on the ground. "Go after him. Don't let him escape." Only then did the 7 female soldiers stop and turn around, wanting to give chase. However, after 2 breaths of time, the man was nowhere to be seen. Just when they thought that the assassin would definitely run far away, with a muffled bang, a figure flew back from the side door. After taking a closer look, who else could it be if it wasn't the assassin just now? After landing on the ground, the killer looked pained. Obviously, he was beaten back, and the person who hit him was so strong that he lost his strength for a moment. As soon as he landed on the ground, he wanted to stand up and fight, but 2 steel blades flashing with white light were already placed on his neck. Then, A sharp pain suddenly came from the bend of his calf, accompanied by a very light crack sound. The person who kicked him was Qiu Vi, the captain of the first guard. Needless to say, his entire left calf was crippled by this kick. Chou Wu led his men to restrain the assassin. It was at this moment that Badao Jiang and Pang Yu appeared from the side door. Clearly, it was because of their timely arrival that the assassin was forced to retreat and heavily injured to the ground. Seeing that Ba Dao River's Pang Yu had also come out, Captain Chou Wu nodded his head approvingly. Clearly, he was very satisfied with their performance. Then he looked around with a serious expression and said, "It's dangerous here. Let's get out of the city first and send a signal to the outside." After Qiu Vi said that, Tai Qingyi led a group of female guards to cover Hu Yan and Madame Shui and walked out of the rouge shop. The landlady and the 3 waitresses in the shop were also carried out by the other guards. 2 guards escorted the killer, who had lost the ability to move his left leg, out of the Lou's rouge shop. However, just as the other guards were approaching them, suddenly, an arrow pierced through the air. Out of instinct, Qiu Vi shouted, "Protect the madam." Then, he led the others toward Hu Yan and Madame Shui. As it turned out, it was a false alarm. The arrow was not aimed at anyone else, but at the assassin. Because he was not prepared, the arrow hit him in the chest. In just a breath, the wounded killer died with black blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. The arrow is poisonous. Be careful, everyone. After Chou Wu stepped forward to take a look, his pupils suddenly shrank. Then, he shouted to the people around him. While protecting the 2 matriarchs, he pulled out a small pistol in his right hand and suddenly fired at the sky. The government office of Gaozhou Prefecture. This was where Kuang Yi was staying, as well as the place where he and Yang Chendong were discussing matters. When they arrived, Kuang Yi smiled and invited Yang Chendong into a small study room. They closed the door and cut off all contact with the outside world. There were no outsiders in the room. Kuang Ye's smile disappeared and was replaced by a look of guilt. He cupped his fist and said to Yang Chendong, "Duke Zhongwei, I am so incompetent. The emperor has sent a decree, but he did not immediately agree to confer you the title of king." "Lord Kuang, what is the meaning of this? Please don't be like this. This duke is unable to accept it." Kuang Yi was so respectful towards Yu Jia. Most likely, he was only respectful towards Ying Zong. Yang Chendong, who had just sat down, quickly stood up and held Kuang Ye's arm. Kuang Yi let out a long sigh and said, "Loyal Duke, this old man has let you down." "Don't say that. This is the emperor's will and has nothing to do with you. But what's going on? Can you tell me clearly?" Yang Chendong let out a long sigh, pretending that it was the first time he had received the news. "This." Kuang Yi first revealed a troubled expression, then stomped his foot and said, "Forget it, there are some things that cannot be avoided even if you want to. This old man will explain it to the loyal duke." Kuang Yi seemed to have gathered a lot of courage and told Ying Zong about the emperor's decree. Especially when he talked about how important the title of king was and how he had to inform Baiming and get their approval, his tone became even more serious. The reason why Kuang Yi did this was to give Yang Chendong hope. A person can only do things well when there is hope in their eyes. If he really couldn't see any future, who knew what unimaginable things he would do? Now that Kuang Yi said this, how could Yang Chendong not understand what he meant? With regards to such words of comfort, not to mention himself, even the other party probably wouldn't believe it. He couldn't help but bitterly smile. "Minister Kuang, I am calling you Uncle Kuang. Do you believe what you just said?" Ah! Kuang Yi, who was still lowering his head and playing the pity card, suddenly heard Yang Chendong call him uncle. He felt that something was wrong. Then, he heard Yang Chendong say, "Do you believe it yourself?" His face turned red and he didn't know what to say. Seeing that Kuang Yi was speechless, Yang Chendong's expression turned gloomy. He continued, "After defeating the Huang bandit army, all the generals were promoted and received benefits. May I ask if this has anything to do with me?" This. Kuang Ye's expression became even more unnatural. In this matter, Ying Zong was indeed in the wrong. Seeing that Kuang Yi did not respond, Yang Chendong continued, "With the empty position of an imperial envoy, I will let it go. If you don't give me a single grain of military pay, I will not quibble. Even if you don't give me any rewards, I can endure it." However, after defeating the Huang bandit army and delivering Huang Yuliang's head, Not only did the emperor remove me from my position as imperial envoy, he also ordered the mercenaries to leave immediately and sent a large army to watch over us. May I ask, even if you want to burn the bridge after crossing the river, isn't this action too fast? If Minister Kwang was in my position, how would he explain this to my brother, the leader of the mercenaries? Ask me. Each question was like a bolt of lightning that smashed into Kwang Ye's heart like a hammer. He was speechless and his face turned red. Sigh. Yang Qindong didn't point at Kwang Yi to answer his questions. Even if Zhu Qizhen was here, he would probably keep his mouth shut. After using up the mercenaries, they found that the King of Min's faction in Yunnan was very powerful. They asked us to work for them, but we didn't get any benefits. Even if I could figure it out, how could I explain it to the mercenaries? Would they be able to think it through? Don't say any more. Kwang Yi finally spoke. Then, he slowly raised his head and looked at Yang Qindong with a pair of expectant eyes. The emperor has wronged you. But no matter what, the southern Ming Empire is weak now. Please help us. Thinking about it, Master Yang has assisted several generations of Ming emperors. You have wholeheartedly served the country and the emperor. Kwang Yi wanted to play the emotional card. However, he thought his method was correct. He didn't know that when he mentioned this, Yang Qindong became even angrier. Are you talking about my father? If others don't know, may I ask Minister Kwang, why did my father retire and return to his hometown? Why did he die on the way back? He racked his brains for decades for the Great Ming, but he didn't even want to return home to retire. If he was in heaven, he probably wouldn't think it was worth it. After Yang Qindong finished speaking, Kwang Ye's eyes flashed. He didn't expect that Yang Qindong was still defending his father. If this was the case, then the problem was serious. As one of the three Yangs, Yang Rong assisted several emperors of the Great Ming and was finally appointed as Master Yang. It could be said that he was a high-ranking official. However, with the rise of the eunuchs, especially the suppression of Wang Zhan's faction, he died on the way back. How could there not be a reason for his disappointment? Chapter 447. Because of this matter, Kwang Yi felt that it was unfair, but he only thought about it in his heart. After all, even if it was him, if he offended Wang Zhan, he would not have a good ending. However, so many years had passed after all. He originally thought that Yang Qindong would have forgotten about it, but now it seemed that he was still a son. How could he dare to forget about his father's matter? In that case, could it be that this person's resentment towards the Great Ming dynasty ran so deep? If that was the case, then things would be difficult to handle. Some thoughts, once born, would be like demons haunting one's body. It was difficult to get rid of them. Kwang Ye's expression changed again and again. He was still trying to analyze what Yang Qindong wanted to do. But at this moment, the sixth young Master Yang spoke again. Forget it, that was a long time ago. Let's not talk about it. But Minister Kwang, do you think I will repeat my father's old path? Yang Qindong's face was very serious, which made Kwang Ye's heart tremble. Old path. Could it be that when one was old, one would be ostracized, oppressed, or even leave helplessly and die in a foreign land? This was probably an outcome that no one wanted to see. Thinking about it carefully, although Zhu Qizhen did not persecute Yang Rong with Wang Zhan, he really did not help much. He only carried out the slogan of not being punished. It was like this in the past. Now that Yang Qindong had become so powerful and feared, how would he be treated when he lost his power? It was no wonder that Yang Qindong wanted to be conferred the title of king. After all, if he really became a king with a different surname, it meant that he would have more protection. For example, he could build a king's residence according to the rules and even have his own guards. Perhaps this way he would be safer. Every man for himself, and the heavens take the hindmost. Yang Qindong thought about the future when he was powerful. This was called scheming and astute, which was very normal. But facing such a question, Kwang Yi did not know how to answer. Fortunately, Yang Qindong didn't want him to answer, he just asked a question. Through this matter, he wanted to tell Kwang Yi why he wanted to be king. It wasn't because he was ambitious, but because he wanted to find a guarantee. All right, Minister Qi, let's not talk about these issues. Since His Majesty has begun to seriously consider it and has contacted His Majesty Beiming, what's wrong with me waiting for news? But it doesn't seem to be enough to make the mercenaries work hard. Of course, Kuang Yi knew that this so-called serious consideration was nothing more than a pretense to give an answer to Yang Chendong's request. But in fact, it was impossible for this matter to pass. No matter if it was Ing Zong or Dai Zong, they wouldn't want to see the rise of a king with a different surname. He believed that Yang Chendong must be able to see through this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have achieved so much in such a short period of time. The reason why he said this was just because he saw through it and didn't say it out loud. This was a smart person. As for the next mention that it wasn't enough, Kuang Yi knew that the other party was a little moved, or he wanted to continue to make more contributions and save more capital. He also answered this sentence very happily. Of course it isn't just these. If Minister Qi has any request, you can put forward it. As long as it is within this old man's ability, I will definitely speak to His Majesty. Well, then let's see the sincerity first. As far as I know, Songjiang Prefecture in history, there is a saying, first Songjiang Prefecture, then Shanghai Bund. Songjiang Prefecture is the predecessor of Shanghai. Originally had a shipyard, but it is now idle. There are many ships that have been in the water, as well as those that have not been in the water yet. There are also many iron ore and steel there. Now there is not much use for them to be placed there. It just so happens that the mercenaries need these. I have also received news from the mercenary leader that they want to get these things. This should not be a problem. The Ming dynasty banned the sea. Regarding this policy, although after Zhu Qizhen went to Nanjing and became the emperor of the southern Ming dynasty, there was already news that he wanted to remove this restriction. After all, there were still many opportunities at sea. Especially in the past, the great Ming dynasty's navigation industry was very developed. Once it was opened, it would bring a lot of benefits to the southern Ming dynasty. If it weren't for the sudden outbreak of war in the south, the problem would have been solved by now. The timing of Yang Chendong's suggestion was extremely accurate, which also made it impossible for Kuang Yi to refuse. What's wrong? You didn't agree to his request before and used all kinds of reasons to delay it. Now that he said that he wants something that you don't want, you still have the nerve to refuse? If this is also fine, then don't ask him for help if you have any problems in the future. Mutual assistance was the key. It was the key to sustainable development. Only giving without any return, this kind of relationship wouldn't last long. Kuang Yi only thought about it in his mind and nodded. I can't give an answer now, but it shouldn't be a big problem. In short, this old man will do his best. That's good. Let's wait for this matter to be done. After the mercenaries can pull the steel from Songjiang Prefecture, then let's talk about how to deal with the current situation. When Yang Chendong heard Kuang Ye's words, he knew that the matter was mostly done. He relaxed his body and leaned back on the wooden chair behind him. That's natural. It's just that the current situation seems to be extremely unfavorable to us. If it's possible, if the mercenaries take action a day earlier, I'm afraid that we can save many people from the abyss of suffering. Kuang Yi thought about whether he could persuade Yang Chendong to take action first. At least, he could stand out and attract attention and relieve the pressure of the southern Ming dynasty's army. It was just that Yang Chendong saw through such a scheme at a glance. Minister Kue, the mercenaries don't belong to me. Ah, that's right, that's right. Then I will immediately report the situation here to the emperor. If it's urgent, it shouldn't take long for the news to come back. Kuang Yi was reminded that this matter was brought up by the leader of the mercenaries. If it wasn't resolved, would the mercenaries take action easily? Even if it was Yang Chendong, he would not have the strength to do so. Of course, Kuang Yi wouldn't think that the real leader of the mercenaries was Yang Chendong. Firstly, the other party was too young. Whether it was Baiming or the southern Ming dynasty, they had investigated his past and didn't find anything strange about him. Secondly, the mercenaries were too powerful, especially when they had extremely advanced firearms in their hands. How could such things be created by a young man? Although it was ridiculous to say that saving a life could command the mercenaries, no smart person would believe it. Most likely, someone wanted to borrow Yang Chendong's hand to make the mercenaries famous. But in the end, putting the young master of the Yang family in the position of the leader of the mercenaries was also unbelievable. No one would believe that the title of the leader of the mercenaries was real and had the greatest deterrence. Now that he wanted something in the name of this person, how could Kuang Yi dare to be careless and bargain? He had already decided in his heart that after Yang Chendong left, he would immediately write a secret letter to the emperor. Moreover, he had to go quickly and show the leader of the mercenaries that they were very efficient. This would definitely be beneficial for future cooperation. After everything was done, if he could send people to the mercenaries' headquarters to learn and even buy the advanced firearms in the mercenaries' hands, he wouldn't have to worry about the great Ming dynasty not being unified. He wouldn't have to worry about the provocation and harassment of the surrounding small countries. While Kuang Yi was still thinking about these things and even making plans for a beautiful future, he suddenly heard the faint sound of a gunshot. Then, a dazzling beam of light shot up into the sky. Even during the day, he could still vaguely see the dazzling scene of flying into the sky. The signal flare that Qiu Vi shot was not a crude thing made by the newly developed ordnance stone in Qiqian City, nor was it a rudimentary toy made during the Republic of China or the war. It was a product made during the heyday of the military after the founding of the People's Republic of China. It represented the high-tech products of the 21st century. The quality of the signal flare was also very powerful. Once it was shot out, it was impossible for the nearby people not to see it. It was precisely because of its power that when it flew into the sky, not only did the cold vanguard army, who had been on guard outside the city, see it, even Yang Chendong, who was discussing matters in the city, saw it immediately. Bang! Just as the signal flare rose into the sky, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Then, the door was kicked open from the outside. Tiger Man and Beta Persei each carried a pitch-black Type 95 pistol and rushed into the room. "Young master, are you okay? Our brothers are dealing with the people outside." Tiger Man first looked carefully at Yang Chendong as soon as he came in. When he found that the young master was fine, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then, he stood in front of Yang Chendong as if he wanted to hurt the young master and kill him first. Beta Persei was even more direct. He strode forward, grabbed Kuang Ye's collar, and lifted him up. When his feet were in the air and he felt that it was difficult to breathe, Kuang Yi, whose face was flushed, shouted in dissatisfaction, "What are you doing? Put me down, put me down." No matter what, he was still the dignified Minister of War. Now that he had the title of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, he was a well-known lower first-rank official. Even in the entire southern Ming dynasty, he was one of the most powerful people. Now that he was lifted up by someone, it was a psychological blow, not to mention how he felt. Put Minister Chung down first. Yang Chendong had already thought of many things in this short period of time. Since the signal flare rose into the sky, it couldn't be unintentional. Something urgent must have happened. However, it didn't seem likely that it was related to Kuang Yi. If that was the case, why didn't he see any executioners in this room? As long as an old man like Kuang Yi was here with him, even if he had just been cured of the poison, he wouldn't be a weak person. Was Kuang Yi that bold? Chapter 448. Yang Chendong didn't believe that Kuang Yi had anything to do with this. At the very least, he shouldn't have been involved. That was why he asked Beta Persei to put Kuang Yi down. With Yang Chendong's order, Beta Persei reluctantly put Kuang Yi down. Kuang Yi coughed violently after he was released. Speaking of which, Yang Er's strength was really great. That grab just now didn't have the slightest intention of being lenient. If he hadn't let go in time, it was likely that he would have suffocated to death in just a moment. After a series of violent coughs, Kuang Yi, whose face was still a little red, asked angrily, "What are you trying to do?" Kuang Yi only shouted angrily. He didn't ask too much because he realized that something was wrong. If Yang Chendong really wanted to harm him, he could have done it the moment he entered the room. Why did he have to talk for so long, to the point that the matter was basically settled before he acted? He felt that there must be some kind of misunderstanding. "What are we trying to do? Let's see what your men do first," Yang Chendong retorted. Although he respected Kuang Yi and some of the things he did, when it came to matters of life and death, he wouldn't hesitate to kill. "My subordinates." Kuang Yi fell silent after saying this. Naturally, he didn't have the slightest ill will towards Yang Chendong. Especially when he still needed to ask for help, he wouldn't have any other thoughts. However, he couldn't control what his men wanted to do. If someone disobeyed him and wanted to do something, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to do it. At least before he figured out what was going on, he didn't dare to make any promises. Kuang Yi didn't say anything, so Yang Chendong didn't ask. Instead, he calmly sat back in his chair and looked outside. He believed that since there was a chance to send a signal, it shouldn't be too urgent. He just had to wait for the news. As long as he was fine, the Yang family army wouldn't be in a mess and there wouldn't be any big trouble. Yang Chendong quickly sat down with a calm look on his face. This gave Tiger's mane and Beta Persei a backbone, and they were no longer as flustered as before. Although Kuang Yi didn't sit down, he had temporarily regained his freedom. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Not to mention other things, just this calmness alone was something that no young man could do. While they were waiting, the outside gradually quieted down. From the beginning to the end, not a single Ming soldier or general rushed over. From this point on, Kuang Yi sighed in his heart. How could he not? With his experience, he could guess that his subordinates had been subdued. Or else, why would no one care about him, the powerful minister of the Ministry of War? Report. In less than a cup of tea's time, someone finally appeared outside the room in the inner courtyard. This person was no stranger to Yang Chendong. It was Ba Daojiang, who had joined the first guard squad not long ago. What's the matter? Speak. As soon as he saw Ba Daojiang, Yang Chendong frowned. He knew that the first guard squad was assigned to protect his 2 wives today. Could it be that something had happened to them? Unconsciously, Yang Chendong's right fist suddenly clenched. He swore that no matter who it was, if anyone dared to have ideas about his wives or hurt them, even if it was related to the Southern Ming Emperor, he would never forgive them. Even if he was still not strong enough, even if he had limited military strength, insufficient population, and some of the foundations were not well established, he would still go crazy. Yang Chendong had the existence of a large warehouse. If he was forced into a corner, he would show everyone what a real cannon was, what a human meat grinder tank was, and what a high-altitude plane was. Yang Chendong's anger was conveyed through his tone. Ba Daojiang, who was half kneeling on the ground, felt a chill run down his spine. Recently, he was fortunate enough to become a member of the first guard squad and had more opportunities to interact with the 6th young master. It was because of this that this person who was younger than him always gave him the impression that he was very kind. It was hard for him to get angry, and even if the sky fell, he would not change his expression. However, now that he was so angry, it was as if he was a completely different person. Ba Daojiang's mind could not help but be in a mess. However, after all, he had been in the Jianghu for so many years, so he still had the basic skills to calm himself down. More importantly, he was now one of the 6th young master's men, and he was the kind that was fully trusted. With that in mind, Ba Daojiang tried his best to remain calm. Then, he recounted what happened in and outside Lu Shi's rouge shop. Assassination. Fortunately, they were fine. After hearing this, Yang Chendong heaved a sigh of relief. However, his tone was still strict. Are the 2 madams safe now? Has the army entered the city? Replying to the 6th young master, the madams are very safe. They are under several layers of protection and will not be in any danger. 1st Battalion Commander Wuxia has already led the army into the city and is taking over the city's defense. Ba Daojiang reported what he saw along the way, as well as what Captain Qiu Vi had told him. Unexpectedly, just as he said this, Kuang Yi suddenly spoke. That's impossible. I didn't hear any killing. The city's defense is also so tight. How did your army enter the city? Kuang Yi naturally did not believe it. This time, he had been very careful when he summoned Yang Chendong for a meeting. The generals below were also afraid that Yang Chendong would flip out, so they had arranged everything beforehand. After Yang Chendong and the others entered the city, they had tightened the defense. General Yu Guang was personally standing on the city wall to prevent any accidents from happening. There were also hundreds of Ming Dynasty soldiers with him. They were already prepared and had a large number of people. How could they be taken down so easily? The key was that there was no sound of movement. This was something unimaginable. Kuang Yi did not believe it. Yang Chendong was unwavering. Since Ba Daojiang dared to say this, he must have seen something with his own eyes. As for whether or not they could complete this mission, he was not worried at all. During this period of time, the Leng Feng soldiers did not have any specific training. Their goal and mission was to quickly attack the city. When the chains and climbing ropes were taken out, the Gaozhou prefecture, which was not very sturdy to begin with, was not much different from their own backyard. Yang Chendong knew why the Leng Feng soldiers were called elites and how powerful they were. He did not doubt the report. His anxious heart finally relaxed, and his expression returned to its original natural state. "All right, you've worked hard. Let's wait here together." "Yes," Ba Daojiang replied respectfully. He took out the black 9-5 style from his back and stared at the door. He looked like a door god who could stop 10,000 men from entering the door. It was an awe-inspiring sight. No one answered him from the beginning to the end. Kuang Yi, who was bored, finally sat down obediently. However, there was a hint of worry in his expression. He could tell that the scout who came to report would not lie. If that was the case, wouldn't his soldiers be too useless? This time, they waited for a little longer, but in less than an hour, the footsteps outside began to become more frequent. Then, a few officers in camouflage uniforms with pistols on their belts walked in. The leader was the commander of the 2nd Lang Feng Regiment, Luo Pa. Behind him was the commander of the 1st Battalion, Wu Sheng. Because Kuang Yi was there, Luo Pa did not bow. He only gave a standard military salute and said, "Commander, everything outside is under control. The 4 gates in the city are also locked down. We are searching for the assassin's accomplices. There is no news yet. Do you? Let's go out and take a look." Yang Qindong nodded slightly to show that he understood. He then said to Kuang Yi, who was still in shock, "Minister Chang, shall we go and take a look?" Although this was a negotiating tone, Kuang Yi knew that if he didn't go, he was afraid that he would be forced into a fight. Moreover, he really wanted to know who wanted to assassinate Yang Qindong's wife and bring him such trouble. "Let's go and take a look. If the assassin is my subordinate, I will definitely give the Duke of Loyalty a satisfactory answer." Kuang Ye's words were very smooth. It was obvious that he had made up his mind. If the person who did this was really his subordinate who made the decision without permission, then he really didn't mind killing a few people to satisfy his appetite. Yang Qindong wanted Kuang Ye's attitude. Just like how Kuang Yi could not fall out with him, he did not want to fall out with Kuang Yi either. Following Yang Qindong, Kuang Yi and the others walked out of the room. When they arrived at the outer courtyard, they saw Guaning, Ma Wei, and the others with bruises all over their faces. They were tied up like dumplings and pressed to the ground. Judging from their clothes, they were covered in dust, and Guanying's lapel was in tatters. They must have gone through an intense resistance. It was just that they were helpless. They were not as strong as others and would eventually be trampled under their feet. When Kuang Yi walked out, Guaning and the others who were still struggling to turn their heads instantly became obedient. This was too shameful. This was especially true for Guaning. The last time he fought with Yang Er, he was beaten quite badly. However, he thought that it was just a special case. If he encountered ordinary mercenaries, with his skills, it would be easy for him to fight against 3 or 4 of them. But just now, he was only facing a mercenary. He was still suppressed and beaten until he was pressed to the ground and could not move. Both of them were alone, yet he had easily dealt with him. It was no wonder that he felt ashamed to face anyone. Of course, if he knew that his opponent's name was Dao Xiao, he would not be so depressed. He was the captain of the 2nd Guard team. For Yang Qindong to be able to make them responsible for his safety, one could only imagine how strong they were. Although Guaning was powerful, the intensity and method of training were completely different from the mercenaries. It was normal for him to be defeated. Chapter 449. This was also thanks to Yang Qindong telling all his subordinates before entering the city that they should not fire unless absolutely necessary. After all, the Southern Ming Empire was still their ally, and even their superior. If not for this order, Guaning and Ma Wei would not be standing here alive after being hit by the flying bullets just now. Oh no! They were kneeling here. Seeing the subordinates, he was so proud of being pressed to the ground. Kuang Ye's expression became very ugly. However, at this moment, he wasn't in a position to criticize them. He only walked in front of them and asked in a very strict tone, "Who sent people to assassinate the Duke of Loyalty's wife? Stand up now and I'll give you a quick death. If you don't speak and I find out, I can guarantee that your 3 clans won't have a good life." Even the 3 clans were involved. It could be seen that Kuang Yi was truly angry. However, no matter what he said, Guaning and Ma Wei had a confused expression. It was obvious that this was the first time they heard of this matter. Humph. Don't pretend to be innocent. If this old man finds out, don't think about living. Kuang Yi coldly threw down these words, but his heart relaxed. From his observation, these two generals shouldn't know about this. If that was the case, then perhaps the assassin really wasn't sent by his subordinates. Yang Qindong was also seriously looking at all of this. He almost reached the same conclusion as Kuang Yi. Some things could be deceived with words, but not with the eyes. Of course, there were some people who were very good at acting. However, since they didn't admit it, then he would first go and see who the assassin was. As long as he could figure out this person's identity, he would be able to find some clues. The group of people walked out of the gate and went straight to the Lu Rouge shop. Along the way, they could see a Lang Feng brother standing guard not far away. This was enough to prove that the entire Gaozhou prefecture had been taken over by the mercenaries. Kuang Yi knew that everything Ba Daojiang said was true. At this moment, his expression was very ugly. Gaozhou prefecture wasn't very big, and Lu Shi's Rouge station wasn't far from the yamen. It didn't take long for the group to arrive. As soon as Yang Qindong appeared, Hu Yan and Madame Shui, who were protected by several layers of people, rushed out and ran to Yang Qindong. "Darling, we're fine. It's just that what happened just now was really scary." "It's okay, it's okay. It's all over now." Yang Qindong hugged and comforted the two ladies. Then he said to Captain Tai Qingyi, who was slowly following behind him, "Send the two ladies into the carriage first." Female guards had already come forward to escort Hu Yan and the others to the car. On the other side, the first guard captain, Qiu Vi, who was in charge of things here, also walked up to Yang Qindong and reported in a low voice, "Young master, the Phantom Sniper team has taken control of this place. It's very safe here, and there are no blind spots. The Wolf Fang Special Forces have already chased after the other killer. With the city gate closed, no one can escape." "Okay." Yang Qindong nodded slightly, indicating that he knew everything. Then he asked, "Where's the killer?" "He's here." Qiu Vi turned around and led Yang Qindong and the others forward. Then he added, "The killer's identity has been confirmed by people who know him in the city. His name is Mo Tuo. Judging from his figure and underwear, he shouldn't be a Han or Miao person. He seems to be a Jiaoji person." "Jiaoji?" Hearing this inference, Yang Qindong's face flashed with doubt for a moment. "Yes, people from the security bureau just came over. Judging from his underwear habits, he should be a Jiaoji person without a doubt." Qiu Vi didn't just say it casually. This was the conclusion given by the security bureau personnel, who were familiar with the situation of all parties. "Okay." Yang Qindong nodded again. Countless question marks and possible scenarios flashed through his mind. Kuang Yi and the others who were following behind them heard the word, Jiaoji, and couldn't hear anything else. Even so, Kuang Yi still strode over. Other than Ba Daojiang, who was following closely behind him to prevent any accidents, the rest of Lang Feng didn't move at all. An old man in his 60s was nothing in their eyes, even if this old man was the Minister of War. Kuang Yi strode forward and tore open Mo Tuo's coat. When he saw the clothes inside, his eyes focused and he shouted, "Yes, he should be a Jiaoji person. This kind of loose collar is their specialty. I've seen it before when I dealt with them." The climate in Jiaoji was warm all year round, so the collar of their underwear was extremely loose. Unlike the Ming army, although the climate in the south was also hot, the collar of their underwear was still very tight due to military regulations. Yang Qindong could understand Kuang Ye's shouting and completely forsaking his bearing as the Minister of War. This was equivalent to eliminating him as a suspect. In fact, Kuang Yi had no motive to harm Yang Qindong at this moment. He wanted to borrow the strength of others, but he couldn't. Why would he try to kill him? Judging from this point alone, Kuang Ye's suspicions were greatly reduced. However, Yang Qindong wouldn't say it out loud. He wanted to make Kuang Yi hesitate. After all, this territory was under the jurisdiction of the Southern Ming Empire. If something happened here, it wasn't wrong to look for the Southern Ming Empire. After Kuang Yi shouted for a while, he realized that no one agreed with him and could only give up. However, looking at his complexion, it was much better than before. He must have known the truth and was now relaxed. The atmosphere at the scene became much quieter. Tiger's man had already found a chair for Yang Qindong to sit down. Then, Qiu Vi reported what happened in detail. The sixth young master kept nodding as he listened. His gaze towards Tai Qingyi, Ba Daojiang, And Pang Yu also became much gentler. Yang Chendong's emotions calmed down and everyone couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Even Minister Kuang Yi, who originally didn't know what happened, looked much calmer. His mind was spinning rapidly as he thought about the origin of the current situation, the cause and effect, and what kind of impact it would have on himself and the Southern Ming Empire. Time passed quickly while he was deep in thought. About an hour later, the Wolf Fang Special Forces finally appeared. Captain Tai, who, along with his team members King Kong, Violent Ape, and a few others, appeared with a relatively thin man in tow. The sixth young master. This is the person who ambushed the assassin and destroyed the evidence. He ran very quickly and took some effort. Captain Tai, whose voice rang out as the Langya Special Forces pressed the assassin to kneel on the ground. Everyone's gaze naturally fell on the assassin. However, even in the face of so many murderous glares, the assassin didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he looked at Yang Chendong, who was 2 meters away, and laughed loudly. "Brat, you dare to help the Southern Ming Empire go against our Jiaoji? Even if we can't kill you today, you won't have a good ending the next time. You will live in fear forever. Haha." After a few laughs, a piece of his tongue suddenly fell to the ground. He had actually killed himself by biting his tongue. Before coming here, Tai Hu and the others had carefully checked the assassin's mouth. After confirming that there was no poison, they were relieved to reattach his chin so that he could speak normally. However, no one had expected him to commit suicide by biting his tongue so straightforwardly. One must know that a person who could do such a thing so resolutely must be extremely ruthless. Perhaps it was easy for a person to be ruthless to others, but it was really rare to be so ruthless to oneself. After vaguely revealing his purpose, the assassin's mission was considered completed. He died in front of Yang Chendong. This scene shocked even Tai Hu. He quickly half-knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness. However, Yang Chendong waved his hand and stopped him. "Forget it. It's not your fault that such a person had the will to die." Of course, Yang Chendong could tell that the assassin was a man of sacrifice. From the moment he appeared, he did not intend to live anymore. He was even willing to live to see Yang Chendong just to say what he had just said. In the end, he just wanted to be a guide and point the way. As for his claim that he had been ordered by Jiaoji, who would believe that? Regardless of who had ordered him to do so, the possibility of Kuang Ye's instigation had to be eliminated. Whether the assassination of Hu Yan and Madame Shui was successful or not, it would only anger Yang Chendong. As long as he was not a fool, he would not carry out such an audacious plan in his own territory. "Minister Xia, I'm a little confused. I'd like to return to the military camp first. As for what we talked about earlier, please do it quickly." Yang Chendong stood up and did not apologize to Kuang Yi. "Although this matter was definitely not ordered by this person, it happened in your territory and within your jurisdiction. Based on this point, it would not be too much to wrong you." Of course, Kuang Yi understood this. He hated the uselessness of his subordinates for allowing the mercenaries to enter the city so easily. He also hated the fact that these assassins chose to act in Gaozhou Prefecture and implicated him. However, at the same time he was happy. No matter who had sent the assassins, they had successfully angered Yang Chendong. Based on this alone, he did not need to urge these mercenaries to be ruthless in the future when faced with the rebel army of King Min. Gaozhou Prefecture, which had just been occupied by the mercenaries, was returned just like that. At the same time, Kuang Yi and his thousands of soldiers were given freedom. "Teacher. Minister Xia." Seeing Guaning, Ma Wei, Yu Guang and the others' wronged and ashamed expressions, Kuang Yi waved his hand magnanimously. "Forget it. It's not that you are too incompetent. It's just that the mercenaries are too powerful. From now on, you will see the difference between us. Train well. Even if you had more than half of the mercenaries' abilities, the Southern Ming Empire would not have fallen into such a passive situation." Chapter 450. From Kuang Ye's words, it could be seen how optimistic he was about the mercenaries and how helpless he was about the Southern Ming army. The mercenaries protected Yang Chendong as they walked out of Gaozhou Prefectural City. However, the sixth young master didn't immediately return to the carriage. Instead, he walked with the Lung Feng soldiers. He would do as much as he could to get closer to the military as he could. After all, the army was the foundation of a country. If he didn't have control of the army, then the so-called political power was just a joke. Seeing Yang Chendong walking casually among the troops, the people around him didn't relax. Especially Luo Pa, the leader of the second group of the Cold Front, they were extremely cautious. Even the safety of the 95 style on their backs had been removed. They looked like they were ready to fight any battle at any time. Feeling everyone's nervousness, Yang Chendong chuckled and revealed a very confident expression. There's no need to be nervous. As long as Kuang Yi is here, the Southern Ming army won't dare to be our enemy. Right now, their biggest enemy is still the Min King's rebel army. Since Yang Chendong, who had always been meticulous, made such a statement, the surrounding Lung Feng soldiers naturally relaxed a lot. However, at the same time, there were smart people who heard the different meaning in his words. For example, Tiger's Mane asked the question in his heart. Young master, if that's the case, they won't be our enemy now, but they will be in the future, right? When Tiger's Mane asked this question, the Leng Feng soldiers around Yang Chendong all pricked up their ears. Clearly, this was something they were very concerned about. That's right. Without making Tiger's Mane and the others wait, Yang Chendong nodded with certainty. But it's not that they want to be our enemy, it's that we want to be their enemy. Although the Ming dynasty is still prosperous, some of its policies are no longer popular. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize a boat. Everyone should know this. If we don't reform, then even if we don't do anything, other people will replace us. Yang Chendong's words were not alarmist. Although the great Ming dynasty in this period of history had only entered the middle period and gradually weakened, because of his appearance, too many changes had occurred. For example, the division of the great Ming dynasty into the north and south was the most obvious difference. A powerful country was suddenly split into two halves. Whether it was military strength or economic foundation, they would all suffer a serious blow. In addition, the country's policies were already rotten to the core. Even if he did not make a move, the Ming dynasty would not last as long as it did in history. When Yang Chendong said that there was a problem with the national policy, he was referring to the policy of emphasizing agriculture and suppressing commerce. Although China had always been like this in ancient times, believing that agriculture was the foundation of the country, believing that all labor should be engaged in agriculture and not in industry and commerce. As the saying went, one more person engaged in industry and commerce meant one less person engaged in agriculture. It seemed like this idea was very reasonable. In fact, it was precisely because of this argument that the previous dynasties did not have a large population. Could it be that the monarchs in history did not see the benefits of having more people? Could it be that only Taizu said that there was strength in numbers and that it was easier to do things with more people? Of course not. With more people, it would be more convenient to do anything, especially the recruitment of soldiers. Whether it was the number of people or the quality of the soldiers, it would improve a lot. But why was it that there was a truth that everyone understood, but which dynasty would really implement it? Even when the country was stable, they would relax the training of the army, and even the expansion of the personnel. In the face of the country's crisis, they did not even have a decent army. As a result, they were defeated again and again, losing political power and everything. Naturally, it was not that they could not see all this, but it was limited by the environment. The most important point was the food problem. There was only so much land, and there was a limit to the food. If the population increased, there would definitely not be enough food to eat. This was the most important reason that hindered their development. For example, in the 100 years from the reign of Kangxi to the reign of Qianlong, the price of rice in Jiangnan had increased by 4 times, and the price of fields had increased by more than 10 times. For those poor commoners who did not have the money to eat meat, rice was their rigid demand. Then the problem was, what if they could not afford to buy rice? If they could not even feed themselves, how could they have more children and create a larger population? Fortunately, there were still sweet potatoes in the Qing dynasty. Although its taste was simple and its nutritional value was not high, it could still fill the stomach. Therefore, some people jokingly called the Kangxi and Qianlong age the sweet potato age. There was a certain reason for this. Therefore, in this way the land became the foundation of the country. How to let the people have more land and let them have enough food and clothing. When they were rich, naturally the country would be rich and strong. This was what people meant by hiding wealth among the people. But it was this truth that many people did not understand. On the contrary, soon after a dynasty was established, a privileged class would quickly appear. And this privilege showed that they would have a large area of land in a very short period of time. In the beginning, it might not be much, but as they continued to develop, they would naturally have to seize more land from the people to maintain their power and enjoy a high and luxurious life. They had no choice but to compete with the people for benefits. Take Yang Qindong for example. After he was conferred the title of Duke of Loyalty, he also had his own legal land, and he was given more than 5,000 mu. Because the Ming dynasty was divided into the north and south, in order to discuss Zhu Qizhen, Dai Zongqi you deliberately gave the fief to Jiangning in the south, making this fief impossible. But not everyone was like Yang Qindong, who was feared by the emperor. Most of the nobles who got their hands on land actually benefited from it. So where did these benefits come from? Of course, they could only invade the powerless ordinary people. As a result, the stable life of many ordinary people was broken. They went from owning land themselves to being tenants, which was to rent the land of the rich. Over time, life would become more and more difficult. In order to survive, all kinds of thoughts would appear and be produced. Think about it. When a person's life was a problem, what sense of responsibility and national honor did you expect them to have? For people like this, once there was a war, they would be lucky if they didn't turn around and fight against you. How could you expect them to work for you? More importantly, these privileged people were exempted from taxes. This was equivalent to completely wasting the best land in the country. If this continued, in the long run, how could the country not be destroyed and how could it not be attacked by groups? This was the problem with the Ming dynasty's national policy that Yang Qindong said. And if this national policy was not changed, even if the Qing dynasty did not appear later, it would still be replaced by other forces. Then again, was there a way to solve this problem? Of course there was. As people often said, as long as one was willing to use one's brain, there would always be more ways than difficulties. At least in the face of the current situation, Yang Qindong had a way to solve the problem, and that was to walk with more legs. If a country wanted to develop, to be strong, and to stand at the top of the world, it was absolutely impossible to walk with only one leg. It must be diversified. This meant that not only did they need agriculture, but they also needed industry. Once the country was strong and the people were rich, everyone could live a life without worrying about food and clothing. Then, who would think of rebelling for no reason? Even if there were some people who had such thoughts and wanted to bewitch others, there must be people who dared to agree. How many people would agree to not live a good life and take risks, and even lose their heads? In particular, Yang Qindong attracted potatoes, which had a high yield and could fill the stomach, which was tantamount to solving the problem fundamentally. Then, as long as the land in the hands of the powerful people was weakened and let the people have it again, these people would be guided to develop light industry, handicraft industry, and heavy industry. Then they would be able to become rich. Then it would be good for everyone. Just like Yang Qindong himself, he was developing with such thoughts. All kinds of factories were opened in Xianxia city, and the land further away was developed and planted with all kinds of crops. Moreover, with the mild temperature there, many crops could be harvested twice a year, or even thrice. With food, work, and money to earn, good days would naturally come. After that, it became a matter of how to ensure that the fruits of one's victory would not be taken away by others. Naturally, more people would take the initiative to join the army. Take Lung Feng for example. Pride was one thing, but more than that, they wanted to protect the fruits of their labor, protect their home. In order to achieve this goal, they would really put their lives on the line. This was a completely different concept from the Ming dynasty's soldiers who were paid. With the right path and a good foundation, and with the help of advanced weapons that were several hundred years ahead of the modern world, it was really hard to think of anyone who could be a match for them. This also created the legend of Lung Feng being invincible. Thinking up to this point, Yang Qindong's eyes were filled with hope and desire when he looked forward. In this life, he was destined to bring the Han people to the peak of the world. No one could stop him. What happened in the prefectural city of Gaozhou was quickly discovered by the spies of King Min who had been keeping a close eye on this place. After the news spread, the prepared lobbyist, the eloquent Chen Tian, went straight to Gaozhou Prefecture. At the same time, the secret letter written by Kuang Yi had also been sent to Nanjing City, to the front of Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect. Kuang Yi actually managed to convince Yang Qindong, and more importantly, his opponent even assisted him. Zhao Ji actually sent people to assassinate Yang Qindong's wife. This forced the Duke of Loyal Courage to do something even if he wanted to. Chapter 451. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yang Chendong only wanted the ships that were no longer in use by the Songjiang prefecture. Zhu Qizhen could naturally afford this price. He waved his hand and approved Kuang Ye's report. While sending someone to reply, he also informed the Songjiang prefecture to prepare for the handover of the ships and the preparation work to take out all the steel in the prefecture's inventory. Zhu Qizhen's side had a positive response. Chen Tian also came to the Miao army camp that was stationed near Gaozhou prefecture. Miao Jinlong was one of the leaders of the Miao tribe. Now that he had an army of 60,000, his identity was naturally noble. However, knowing Chen Tian's identity, he still warmly prepared a banquet when Chen Tian arrived. Chen Tian was one of the important strategists of the Min king. As the saying goes, there are 7 ranks in front of the prime minister. No one would want to offend a close official like him unless it was necessary. Not to mention, he had come here to solve the problem in the first place. Naturally, Chen Tian didn't reject Miao Jinlong's warm hospitality. Not only that, but he also explained his mission during the banquet. He also wanted to hear Miao Jinlong's attitude and reaction. After all, they had fought with mercenaries before, so they should be familiar with this Duke of Loyalty. Miao Jinlong knew Chen Tian's purpose of coming. Especially when he heard that Chen Tian wanted to lead the mercenaries to the Jiaoxi kingdom, he raised his hand and agreed wholeheartedly. Due to the geographical location, the Miao people had always been at odds with the Jiaoxi people. Now that there was a chance to weaken the other party's strength, it was of course a good thing. Miao Jinlong was overjoyed. He called out the scholar Zoda and gave him a detailed explanation of what he had learned so far. From Zoda's words, Chen Tian had a better understanding of the mercenaries. He was even more determined to lead the trouble to them. Therefore, he only rested for one night. The next morning, he had someone send a letter to the mercenaries. First, he stated his identity and the purpose of his visit. Since ancient times, there was a saying that the envoys would not be killed when 2 armies fought. But in reality, the people who died as envoys did not know who they were. Before he understood the attitude of the mercenaries, mainly Yang Chendong, Chen Tian would of course not appear rashly. Even if the other party didn't kill him and handed him over to Kuang Yi, he would suffer a fate worse than death. Once the letter reached the mercenary camp, it was quickly delivered to Yang Chendong. When Yang Chendong saw that it was Chen Tian who had come to visit, he was only stunned for a moment before he smiled. It was really like someone delivering a pillow to him when he was feeling sleepy. After the discussion with Kuang Yi, Yang Chendong guessed that Zhu Qizhen would definitely agree to his request if he didn't care about the title of king with a different surname. After all, the king of Min's faction had directly affected the political power of the southern Ming dynasty. But Yang Chendong had been thinking about how to treat King Min's people these days. With the strength of the mercenaries, coupled with the sufficient weapons just sent by the marine, it is not difficult to deal with them face to face. However, if he really did that, the pressure on the southern Ming Empire would decrease, and they would definitely consider dealing with him. This kind of strategy of swallowing wolves and luring tigers was not what Yang Chendong wanted to see. Just because he needed a large number of Han people, he couldn't fall out with the southern Ming Empire. Otherwise, even if he went on a crusade and conquered a large area of land, who would be in charge of it? Let the foreign race take over? This was absolutely impossible. If this was the case, it was unwise to be the enemy of the southern Ming Empire. What he wanted was to slowly digest and change, not kill a lot of Han people to show his strength or build a country similar to the Ming dynasty. If that was the case, it was just a change of dynasty. Once many years had passed, what was the difference between the Ming dynasty and other historical dynasties? The so-called Great Yang Chendong began to think about how to solve the crisis of the southern Ming Empire without making them too big. Once his strength rose to a certain level, it would be time for him to come back and reap the fruits of victory. After thinking for a few days, he finally had some ideas. If he wanted to do this, he must obtain the support of one person, and that is the Min king. As mentioned before, if Yang Chendong wanted to dominate and not just build a country, he needed a large number of people. Then how large is this large number of people? To put it simply, the more the better. According to Yang Chendong's intention, he didn't just want to conquer the Ming dynasty in the future. On the contrary, in order to maintain the growth of the population here, he might want to conquer this place in the future. What he wanted was not just Asia, but the entire world. He wanted the Han people to stand at the top of the world. Wherever you go, Your identity as a Han person is incomparably noble. If you are lucky enough to be born in a Han family, then you will be like a noble from birth. Wouldn't it be difficult to achieve this? Of course it was difficult. However, for the various advanced weapons in the warehouse, and the munitions factories that Xianxia City had given enough conditions and books, the production of new weapons would only increase. As long as the quality of the army was good enough, and there were enough numbers, firearms would have an absolute advantage over spears and swords. This also meant that this idea was destined to not be a dream, and there was a chance to achieve it. There was a problem. After conquering so many territories, how would they rule? That would require a large number of Han people to do it. Without people, even if they could conquer this place, they wouldn't be able to become the ruler of this place. It was just like when the Japanese entered China. How powerful were they at that time? They were even in existence that could sweep through the entire Asia. There were even times when they created an example where a few dozen people could manage a county with hundreds of thousands of people. So what? In the end, if they wanted to devour an elephant, their stomachs would explode. Although there were some other factors, it was undeniable that if they had enough people, they might be able to achieve their goal. Speaking of which, if they wanted to have more people, they couldn't make the Han people under the rule of the Ming dynasty their enemy. Otherwise, if they fought to their heart's content, they wouldn't have enough officials and soldiers who would listen to them and were loyal to them. Even if they destroyed southern Ming and Beiming, the country would still be in chaos. Once chaos began, who knew how many people would die and how many years it would take to restore the population to 60 million? Even if it was 60 million, Yang Qindong still felt that it wasn't enough. Fortunately, after the appearance of potatoes, the food problem of the people was greatly alleviated. Now, whether it was Beiming or southern Ming, they were encouraging people to have more children. From the looks of it, the country's population might increase exponentially in 10 years. The appearance of these new people might increase his chances of achieving his goal. However, the prerequisite was that the Han people's population couldn't be reduced for no reason. For this reason, Yang Qindong couldn't be enemies with the Han people under the King of Min for no reason. What he really wanted to deal with was the foreign race, Jiaoji. Jiaoji was now an ally of the King of Min. How to bypass them to deal with Jiaoji was the problem that Yang Qindong was thinking about these days. At this time, one of the important officials of the King of Min, Chen Tian, wanted to see him. If this wasn't an opportunity, then what was? Thinking about the appearance of the assassin Mo Tua a while ago, he was from Jiaoji. In addition, there was more accurate information from the inside. Mo Tuo's attack was originally the decision of the King of Min's higher-ups. They wanted to kill with a borrowed knife. With this accurate information from the inside, Yang Qindong could guess the main reason for Chen Tian's visit even if he used his big toe. Or rather, this was what Yang Qindong hoped for. This was exactly what he wanted. Even so, Yang Qindong only kept the joy in his heart. On the surface, he still pretended to be indifferent. Never let your opponent know what you were thinking. This kind of person was truly qualified and an excellent diplomat. Young master already knows about this. Arrange for him to come over tomorrow. Tiger's Mane. Go and contact him first. Yang Qindong didn't say much. In fact, he didn't need to say much. Tiger's Mane was one of the closest people to him. He always knew what he was thinking. It was necessary to wait for the right price to sell. Since he had obtained so many benefits from the Southern Ming Empire, there was no reason for the King of Min to not do anything. Young master, don't worry. Tiger's Mane promised as if he knew everything. In the end, his role was the vanguard. At the same time, he was paving the way to raise the status of the young master. The mercenaries quickly replied and promised that Chen Tian could come to the barracks tomorrow to discuss the matter. They also said that he could come openly and didn't need to consider the reaction of the Southern Ming army in Gaozhou. These words were a little generous. Not for other reasons, but through these matters, it could be seen that the relationship between the Duke of Loyal and the Southern Ming Empire wasn't very good. The Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhen, was very afraid of Yang Qindong. This was already public news. Now, it seemed that it wasn't wrong. Chen Tian, who received a reply, was naturally very happy. He thought about how to persuade Yang Qindong when he saw him several times. He also thought about the possible unexpected situations several times. Early the next morning, he brought a group of men and went straight to the barracks of the mercenaries. When they left the barracks of the Miao army, Miao Jinlong sent people to escort them. However, when they were about to reach the city of Gaozhou, the mercenaries in camouflage took over and brought them over. This kind of thing was done in front of the eyes of the southern Ming army. General Yu Guang, who was in charge of guarding the city, gritted his teeth. As early as last night, Yang Qindong sent people into the city to inform Kuang Yi that the king of Min sent people to talk to him. He also agreed and hoped that they would make things convenient. Chapter 452. When the letter was placed in front of him, Kuang Yi knew that he couldn't refuse. Not to mention that for the stability of the southern Ming Empire, they couldn't afford to offend the powerful mercenaries. Just a few days ago, Hu Yan and Madame Shui almost died in the city. They were responsible. They didn't pursue the matter because they knew that it had nothing to do with them. However, if he didn't agree to the envoy sent by Min King to meet with Yang Qindong, then the other party could bring up this matter at any time. At that time, they could casually accuse them of colluding with the assassins. This would make it difficult for them to defend themselves. Face was given to each other. Fortunately, Kuang Yi knew that Yang Qindong still had the Yang family manor in Baiming. The southern Ming Empire had Jianning and brother Yang Si. He couldn't betray the great Ming Empire and didn't dare to do it. Therefore, he made the decision and agreed to the request. Kuang Yi agreed. This was also why Yu Guang didn't dare to act rashly when he saw all this happening right under his nose. The mercenaries were only a squad of soldiers. They brought Chen Tian and his hundreds of subordinates through the city. To be honest, Chen Tian was a little nervous at this moment. Originally, he thought that the mercenaries would send at least a few hundred people, or even a few thousand people to escort him. However, there were only 10 people and they had to walk through the city controlled by the southern Ming army. This was no longer a matter of safety. It was a provocation. Would the southern Ming army really do something in anger? If that was the case, wouldn't his life be over? With this kind of nervousness, the group smoothly walked through the city of Gaozhou. When Chen Tian saw that the city had been left behind, he suddenly felt a burst of cold wind at the back of his head. At this moment, he remembered that he hadn't walked out of the gates of hell. He had just stepped into this place. For example, if he didn't have an agreement with Yang Qindong this time, how would he return to the Miao family's camp from the mercenaries' camp? Without the mercenaries' escort, how could he guarantee his safety? Only at this moment did he feel fear. In the mercenary camp, Tiger's Mane, representing Yang Qindong, met Chen Tian first. He served him good food and wine, fulfilling his role as a host. Chen Tian didn't expect to see Yang Qindong the moment he arrived. Fortunately, he was prepared for this. After investigating Yang Qindong, he knew what kind of person Tiger's Mane was and the importance of his position. So while he was eating, he ordered his men to carry 2 big boxes of gold and place them in front of Tiger's Mane. One box was worth 1,000 taels of gold, so 2 boxes would be worth 2,000 taels of gold. According to the exchange rate of 1 to 8, that would be 16,000 taels of silver. To an ordinary citizen, this amount of silver was more than enough to eat and drink for a lifetime. And this was just Chen Tian's greeting gift. He had already explained to Tiger's Mane that as long as he could meet the Duke of Loyalty, there would be more than 10 times the amount in front of him. The first gift was more than 100,000 taels of silver, and it wasn't even given to the main person. From this, it seemed that Chen Tian was very sincere. Tiger's Mane also stared greedily at the silver in front of him. I can try to see if you can meet my duke. But do you know that Yingzhong has already promised to give Songjiang prefectures and used shipyard to my duke? In comparison, if it's just some gold and silver, I'm afraid it's not sincere enough. He wasn't afraid of making a request, but he was afraid of not saying anything. Chen Tian's eyes were filled with excitement. Of course, we won't just take out these things. In order to show our Min King's sincerity, there are already 500 carriages of steel being sent here. It should arrive in a few days. 500 carriages? Tiger's Mane pretended to be very surprised and then nodded. Well, then I'll try to help you put in a few good words. Tiger's Mane was only willing to help because of the silver. Thank you, General Tiger. If we can achieve our goal this time, Chen Tian will still have more rewards. Haha, you're too kind, Tiger's Mane said with a greedy face and poured a cup of wine directly into his stomach. And on the same night, Chen Tian was allowed to meet Yang Qindong. he met the extremely young but powerful Duke of Loyalty of the Ming Dynasty. Chen Tian greets the Duke of Loyalty. After meeting, Chen Tian's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. He cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. At this time, Yang Qindong was only 21 years old. However, after experiencing so much, he already had the demeanor of a superior person. If he was willing, he could reveal the aura of a superior person at any time. "You are Chen Tian?" Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the tent, stared at the person who came and sized him up. Then, he said very casually, "I heard from Tiger's Mane that you are very good at doing things. You even want to give me a gift? Is it because your King of Min is afraid of me?" Unlike the calmness he showed when he was with Lang Feng, at this moment, Yang Qindong showed a very arrogant side. Although Chen Tian looked submissive at this time, in fact, he was quietly observing Yang Qindong. Before this, he had grasped a certain amount of data and even read a lot of intelligence. However, Chen Tian believed in everything he saw with his own eyes. Although the intelligence said that the Duke of Loyalty was courageous and talented, Chen Tian always thought that this person was still too young. Even if he was young, it was inevitable that he would lose his cool when something happened, especially when he had won repeatedly. It was inevitable that he would be arrogant. Now, it seemed that it was true. Seeing that Yang Qindong had only glanced at him a few times before ignoring him with his nose in the air, not only did he not feel humiliated, on the contrary, he was very happy. It was good to have a weakness. As long as he could grasp it, it would be easy to deal with him. "Yes, our King of Min really wants to be friends with you. You saved Emperor Ingzong without fear of death on the battlefield. You forced Walla's army to retreat with your excellent means. You even completely destroyed Master Huang's army in Guangdong in a very short time. Our King of Min is full of praise for all of these." Everyone liked to hear good words, and Yang Qindong was the same. Hearing Chen Tian talking about his achievements with great familiarity, he laughed and said, "Yes, these are all my achievements. Prince of Min is also a sensible person. If so, why didn't he retreat and surrender immediately after knowing my power? Don't tell me that you want me to lead an army to crush you and repeat Huang Yuliang's old path?" When speaking of these, Yang Qindong deliberately stared at him, as if he was going to scare him. Yes, Duke of Loyalty is very right. People had to bow under the eaves. As an excellent lobbyist, he knew when to show his weak side and when to show his strong side. With a submissive expression, Yang Qindong's expression became much better. Seeing that the sixth young master's temper was not so bad, Chen Tian hurriedly said what he wanted to say. "Our King of Min really wants to be friends with you, Duke of Loyalty. He also knows that we will definitely lose if we fight with you." But when he heard the first part, Yang Qindong was still smiling. But when he heard the last part, his face changed. "But what? But I dare not say what I want to say next. I am afraid that I will make you angry." Chen Tian looked up and showed an aggrieved expression. "Just say what you want to say. I won't blame you. Say it quickly." Yang Qindong looked like he was fooled. Chen Tian knew that the opportunity had come. He straightened his body and said, "But if our King of Min stops now, with Ingzong's personality, he will definitely settle the score. At that time, it will be difficult to keep your life." Chen Tian was not surprised. "So what? When the time comes, this duke will just greet his majesty," Yang Qindong said confidently. When Chen Tian heard this, he despised Yang Qindong very much. He thought, "You are just a duke. How can you boast like this?" But what he didn't know was that this was what Yang Qindong wanted to show him. "Thank you for your kindness, Duke of Loyalty." Although Chen Tian didn't agree with what Yang Qindong said, he still looked very grateful. When he saw the smile on the sixth young master's face, he mustered up his courage and said, "But I am afraid that Duke of Loyalty can't protect King of Min at that time. As far as I know, Emperor Ingzong seems to be on guard against Duke of Loyalty. Otherwise, the matter of conferring a prince with a different surname would not be delayed." He stopped here. When he said this, Chen Tian immediately stopped talking and carefully observed Yang Qindong's performance. He said it just now. If there was anything he wanted to say, he could say it casually. Now, he shouldn't be blamed. Sure enough, Yang Qindong's face was flushed red and he was obviously very angry. He even pointed his finger at Chen Tian, who was standing below. But in the end, he didn't say a word of reproach. "Brother Chen, what am I doing? Don't you know that this matter is the thing that annoys my duke the most?" Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side, said. He seemed to be reprimanding Chen Tian for being insensible, but in fact, he was also reminding him. Chen Tian showed a grateful smile to Tiger's Mane. Then his gaze fell on the angry Yang Chendong and said, "Duke of Loyalty, Emperor Ingzong is really infuriating. But thinking about it carefully, isn't it because you are too young and your qualifications are too shallow? If you can do something earth-shattering for the world to see, I think that when the time comes, even the stingy Emperor Ingzong can't refuse to be conferred a prince." Chapter 453. What do you mean? Speak more clearly. Yang Chendong, who was originally very angry, suddenly straightened his body and stared at Chen Tian with his tiger-like eyes. Since Yang Chendong placed so much importance on these words, Chen Tian was delighted that the other had fallen into his trap. He cupped his hands and said, "I am not talented, but I have an ingenious plan. As long as you can be the Duke of Loyal and Courageous, it will be easy for you to be bestowed the title of king of a different surname." He spoke with such confidence that Yang Chendong's interest was piqued. "What is it?" "Defeat the Jianghu soldiers and show the strength of the Duke of Loyalty." With a determined face, Chen Tian, who was almost gritting his teeth, finally said what was in his heart. "Phew." Exhaling a long breath in his heart, Yang Chendong said in his heart, "As expected, the other party really came for this." Although he was relieved, Yang Chendong pretended to be very shocked. "Defeat the Jianghu soldiers? This is not possible." "Why can't I?" Chen Tian asked in a pressing manner. "Jianghu is so powerful, how can it be so easy to defeat them? Moreover, aren't they the allies of the King of Min? Since we are friends, shouldn't your allies be my friends as well? This is not good." Yang Chendong shook his head lightly and looked like he was talking to himself. When Chen Tian saw this, he felt a sense of disdain in his heart. Just now, he said that he was wise and powerful, and that he would destroy the King of Min's army and ask him to surrender. But when it came to the actual use of weapons, he could not do this and was afraid of that. He really did not understand how such a person could have achieved all those achievements in the past. Chen Tian really despised him in his heart, but he still tried to persuade him. "Duke of Loyalty, although Jianghu is our ally, they are still of a foreign race. As the saying goes, those who are not of our race will have different opinions. The attitude of Rongdi is not the same as that of Hua. No matter what, the King of Min is the king of the Great Ming. He has the pure bloodline of the ancestor. How can he tolerate a foreign race doing whatever they want in the Great Ming? Previously, we had no choice but to form an alliance. But in fact, we were wary of each other. In the end, we were just using each other's relationship. There is no affection." Chen Tian said this righteously and continued, "Unlike our King of Min, who really appreciates Duke Zhongdan. Moreover, we are all Han people, so we should get closer to each other. Not to mention, this can help the Duke of Loyalty achieve great things and become the king of a foreign race. This kind of helping others is what the King of Min likes the most." What Chen Tian said was magnanimous, and he also pretended to be good for Yang Chendong. But in fact, this was not the case at all. The people of the Security Bureau had already sent back the news that the King of Jianghu had taken a fancy to the King of Min's sister, Zhu Lian, who was also Princess Yongsheng, and wanted to marry her. Because of this, the King of Min was furious and said that his sister was willing to marry a foreign race's little king. This was almost the same meaning as when the kingdom of Dongwu wanted to marry Guan Yu's daughter and was rebutted. Although this time, the King of Min took advantage of the power of Jianghu to rise up. But in the end, the King of Min still looked down on the small country of Jianghu. They were just a small province of the Great Ming before, and did not have any cultural inheritance. How could such a person be qualified to marry his sister? Not to mention that there was such a big gap in age. Princess Yongsheng was the king of Annan, Lily, when he was 18 years old. In history, he did not live until 1451, but because of his representative, the Longzi borrowed this person's name to let him live longer. The spectators have a strong historical knowledge, so don't doubt the Longzi on this issue. Thank you very much. He was already more than 60 years old. This was clearly pushing his sister into the fire pit. As the elder brother, and now with such great power, if he could not even protect his own sister, what would others say about him? Just based on this point, the relationship between the king of Min, Zhu Huixing, and the Jiaoji army started to drift apart. In addition, along the way, the Jiaoji army burned, killed, and looted everywhere they passed. They were very overboard and caused the people's lives to be in chaos. The king of Min had already made up his mind to deal with them. It was precisely because of these things that Chen Tian came here to fan the flames and wanted to use someone else to do his dirty work. In their eyes, as long as the two sides could fight, regardless of whether Yang Chendong won in the end or the Jiaoji army won in the end, it would be beneficial to them. Since that was the case, why should they be polite? Chen Tian had his own plans, but he did not know that the handsome young man, Yao Yingjun, who was on good terms with Princess Yongxing, Zhu Lian, was an important spy that the Security Bureau had placed in the other side. The information regarding this had already been sent back, and Yang Chendong was well aware of it. This was the importance of information. If he knew everything in advance, he would have more time to deal with it, and he would be able to find the best way to solve the problem. What Chen Tian said was extremely righteous. From the perspective of the nation and country, even if Yang Chendong knew the truth, he would not correct it. Wasn't all of this what he wanted to do? Since he could not do anything to the Han people, then it should not be a problem to deal with the foreign races. Especially Jiaoji, the predecessor of the modern Vietnam. They had betrayed the country several times and angered the brave People's Liberation Army, causing them to kill their way into their territory. The most hateful thing was that the other party's military warehouse was filled with all sorts of goods that were made in China. That kind of feeling must have been very chilling. In order to prevent such things from happening in the future, Yang Chendong made up his mind to deal with them a few hundred years in advance, so that those disgusting things would never happen again and would disappear forever. With this in mind, Yang Chendong did not expose some of Chen Tian's lies. Instead, he went along with Chen Tian's words and asked, "Against Jiaoji, will you support me?" Chen Tian's face changed from his heroic speech to a trace of awkwardness. "This means that we cannot support you in terms of military strength. After all, everyone knows that they are our Min King's allies. Don't worry, Duke of Loyalty. Although we won't send troops, we will support you in other aspects, such as provisions and information. As long as you don't send troops, we, King of Min, will fully support you if you need anything else." As if he was afraid that Yang Chendong would have some misgivings, Chen Tian patted his chest and promised. "Is that so?" Yang Chendong did not answer immediately. Instead, he fell into deep thought, as if he was thinking carefully. Yang Chendong's lack of response caused Chen Tian to lose his confidence. He was afraid that Yang Chendong would reject him, so he quickly signaled to Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side and receiving benefits from him, with his eyes. Tiger's Mane hesitated at first, but soon made a decision. He looked at Yang Chendong and said, "Duke, Jiaoji has gone too far. Didn't they try to assassinate you 2 days ago? If we don't teach them a lesson, won't we be looked down upon and become a joke to the world?" Yes. Chen Tian slapped his head. How could he have forgotten about this? He quickly said, "Jiaoji sent people to assassinate me. This is really shameful and hateful. Just based on this point alone, we have to teach them a lesson. This is the only way to show the dominance of the loyal and courageous Duke." That's true. Yang Chendong slowly raised his head and agreed. However, he soon shook his head. "No, if we were to fight with the Jiaoji soldiers and the Min King suddenly attacked us from behind, we won't be able to withstand a pincer attack." When he heard Yang Chendong's concerns, Chen Tian immediately replied, "That is impossible. Our Min King is a man of his words. He would never do something so treacherous." "Jiaoji is your ally." Yang Chendong ignored Chen Tian's solemn vow. He only said one sentence and the other party was instantly silenced. But what does the loyal Duke want us to do for you to be completely assured?" Chen Tian did not know how to convince Yang Chendong. Even though they had decided not to fight with the mercenaries in the short term, there were some things that others would not believe even if he said it. "Show me your sincerity. Let's ask the Min King to write a declaration of war and spread it throughout the world, stating that he and Jiaoji have completely broken up. This way, I will believe your sincerity and will send troops. How about that? In addition, you have just occupied Yunnan, Guangxi and Guangdong provinces. I believe you have a lot of captives in your hands. Coincidentally, the leader of the mercenaries, the big brother that I saved, is in need of people. You should also show some sincerity and make my big brother happy. Not a lot, just 100,000 people. Men, women, old and young are acceptable. Yang Qindong proposed the plan that he had decided on long ago. Yang Qindong, who understood the situation of the Min King, naturally knew that the other party did not like the Jiaoji army and would not make a move on him in the short term. However, there was always a possibility. Before the situation changed, who knew what would happen in the future? Most importantly, if he wanted to do this, he would need the support of Nan Ming. This declaration of war became very important. This was also the reason why he could convince Minister Kuang Ye to not make an enemy out of the Min King and the Miao army and focus on dealing with Jiaoji. Without this declaration of war, how would others believe him if he just said it himself? At least, it would be easier for him to ask for 100,000 people. He had just occupied 3 provinces. Others might not have it, but he had a lot of people in his territory. Moreover, he did not only want young people. In this way, he could also help the other party solve the problem of having too many people but not enough food. Yang Qindong proposed his own request. This time, it was Chen Tian's turn to consider. 100,000 people was indeed a problem. He could just give more to the older children and less to the young men. He could make the decision on this issue. If he wanted to make a declaration, it would not be a big deal. However, would people say that the Min King was burning the bridge after crossing the river? After all, they were able to rise so quickly because of the Jiaoji army's help in the beginning. Chapter 454. While Chen Tian was still considering the gains and losses, Yang Qindong spoke again. Jiaoji is a foreign tribe after all. If Prince of Min really wants to achieve something in the future, it would be best for you to draw a clear line with them. They were not like the Miao people. They had been living on this land for generations and were used to being in each other's company. Jiaoji people were very independent. If they were to become successful one day, it would be enough for His Highness, Prince of Min, to be very busy. Of course, you can go back and discuss this with Prince of Min. We are not in a hurry. Yang Qindong was indeed not in a hurry. Regardless of whether it was the steel that Zhu Qizhen wanted to give him or the steel that Prince of Min gave him, they had not arrived yet. With the mindset that having the steel in his hands was the way of the king, he would not do anything as long as these benefits were not in his hands. Even though he was already mentally prepared to fight Jiaoji, he still had to take things one step at a time. Chen Tian thought that there were some things that he could not decide, so he raised his head and said seriously, "Then I will report it to His Highness King Min. I think it will not take long for Duke Zhongdan to give a satisfactory answer. But please rest assured that regardless of whether this matter is successful or not, we have no intention of becoming enemies with Duke of Loyalty and the mercenaries." Yang Qindong nodded satisfactorily at the other party's goodwill. Good. As long as Prince of Min's army and the Miao army do not make things difficult for us, we will not take the initiative to cause trouble. You can rest assured about this. This was considered an agreement that both parties agreed upon. Based on this agreement, Chen Tian did not come here in vain. Thinking that Prince of Min still had to make a decision on the declaration of war, and thinking that Jiaoji was pressuring him step by step, he decided to take his leave. Following this, Lang Feng naturally sent them out of the camp. Unlike when he came, the hundreds of chests of gold and silver that Chen Tian brought were all placed in the mercenaries' camp. This was originally a show of sincerity. Since the negotiations went smoothly, there was no mention of taking back the chests. Not long after Chen Tian left, Tiger's Mane represented him on a trip to Gaozhou's prefectural city. He followed the young master's instructions and explained the key points of this negotiation to the other party. Kuang Yi was waiting for news in the government office. Since Yang Qindong sent someone to inform him that there would be an envoy from King of Min, Kuang Yi could not sit still. Yang Qindong and his mercenaries were so powerful that he was shocked more than once. The current southern Ming Empire was already riddled with holes. They were already facing huge difficulties. If the mercenaries switched sides at this time, the southern Ming Empire would really be in danger. It was precisely because he knew the severity of the matter that he didn't have a single moment of rest in the 2 days since Chen Tian had passed through the city and arrived at the mercenary camp. Because of this matter, Guan Ying, Ma Wei, and the others repeatedly tried to persuade him. For example, they said that Yang Qindong's fourth brother was still in Jianghu. If the Duke of Loyal Courage dared to make a move, they could use his fourth brother to threaten him. Some people even suggested that when Chen Tian passed through the city, they could kill the envoy directly. By then, it would be more difficult for the Duke of Loyal Courage to ally with King of Min. In the face of these schemes, by the time they reached Kuang Yi, they were all rejected by him. Now Yang Chendong had not made a final decision. If they pushed him so hard, it would be easy for him to be pushed to the side of the opponent. If so, they would really be sinners for all eternity. Kuang Yi, who was already very old, would not agree to such a risky thing. Not to mention, based on his understanding of Yang Chendong, this person was very considerate of the overall situation. Otherwise, he would not send troops to Guangdong to quell the rebellion of the Yellow Bandits without receiving any benefits. It was only because the Emperor Zhu Qizhen did not believe in all kinds of things that led to the current situation that was not very good. Thinking of the Emperor, Zhu Qizhen, Kuang Yi also felt a headache. Since ancient times, the imperial power was the greatest. This was indisputable. But there was a premise for everything, that was, the imperial power was consolidated. When the power was strong, it was really the greatest. On the contrary, if you were not strong enough and still wanted others to obey you, then the emperor was not sensible. Not all the generals in the world were like Yu Fei, who could be called back with 12 gold medals. Who was Yang Chendong? If one looked carefully, he had been wandering outside the imperial power. In fact, with the powerful mercenaries as his backing, he also had such strength. In the face of such a strong soldier, the most important thing to do was to find a way to make friends with him and play the emotional card, instead of oppressing him with power and finally making a loss. Of course, although Kuang Yi was also an important minister, he could not represent the emperor in many things. Some things he just thought in his heart. If he really wanted to say that he really wanted to blame Zhu Qizhen, he did not have the power to do so, let alone the ability to bear the consequences. While Kuang Ye's thoughts were still in torment, Tiger's Mane came. This was Yang Chendong's closest person. Many times, his appearance could represent his master. In the main hall, Kuang Yi saw Tiger's Mane. Although he did not personally come out to greet him, his waiting figure in front of the hall was enough to give Tiger's Mane face. Who was Tiger's Mane? In these years, after being trained by Yang Chendong, he was no longer the little follower of the past. This meant that he was reluctant to leave Yang Chendong. Otherwise, if he was casually sent back to Tsuxian City, he would be in existence on the same level as Lang Song and Gao Xiong. It was not impossible for him to be higher than them. Seeing that Kuang Yi was waiting outside the hall, this kind of treatment made him feel flattered. He hurriedly took a few steps forward, clasped his fist and bowed. This little Tiger's Mane greets the minister. Ha! Kuang Yi politely extended his hand and helped Tiger's Mane up. Brother Tiger, there is no need to be so polite. Come, please sit in the hall. Servants, come and serve tea. Kuang Ye's face was full of enthusiasm. Tiger's Mane was also very respectful on the surface, but in his heart, he admired the young master even more. If it was not for the young master's strength, how could he be treated with such courtesy? One must know that this was the Minister of War, and also the Crown Prince's tutor. How could an ordinary person like him come into contact with him, let alone be treated with such courtesy? Tiger's Mane's thinking was correct. The Ming dynasty's hierarchy was very strict. An official was an official, and a citizen was a citizen. This was not something that could be confused at any time. Even if this official's position wasn't high, and the other party was a rich gentleman, the official still had to be stronger in a real conversation. This was because he didn't just represent himself, he had the support of the entire team of scholars behind him. Not to mention a high official like Kuang Yi. Other than the emperor, there were very few people who could give him any face. But it was this kind of person with such a high position that was able to come out of the hall to greet him. If it were any other citizen, they would have already knelt on the ground, with tears flowing down their faces, as if they were willing to die for their friend. Exaggeratedly, even if they were immediately asked to die, there would probably be people who would agree. But all of this was completely different when it came to Tiger's Mane. Following the young master, and especially seeing the development of Crimson City, his vision had long been different from ordinary people. In his heart, even the emperors of the Southern Ming Dynasty and Northern Ming Dynasty could not be compared to his young master, let alone a minister of war. Moreover, a minister of war who was weak and defeated. With this confidence, when Tiger's Mane spoke to Kuang Yi, He maintained enough autonomy, neither servile nor overbearing, and did not have the slightest intention of lowering his head. Kuang Yi listened carefully to Tiger's Mane's report. When he first heard that there were 100,000 people, he did not seem to understand. After all, why would the mercenary army need so many Han people? But then when he heard that Yang Qindong asked the king of Min to make a public declaration of war against the Jiaoji army, his attention was completely diverted. He suddenly stood up from his chair. Did the king of Min agree? Not yet. Tiger's Mane acted as if he did not see Kuang Ye's excitement. He shook his head and said, "The messenger Chen Tian said that he would go back and discuss with the king of Min. But my young master also said that there would be no problem." Yang Qindong said that there would be no problem, so Kuang Yi was much more confident. It had been proven that on such a major issue, the Duke of Loyalty would not speak without thinking. And if this was the case, it would be great. Without the support of the Jiaoji army, the strength of the king of Min's faction would naturally be greatly reduced. At least in the short term, they would not have the strength to continue north. This would give southern Ming more time to breathe. Once they made good use of it, the recruited recruits would be trained, and it would be equivalent to having another powerful army. At that time, they would go all out to the south and solve the problem of the king of Min. Thinking that southern Ming finally saw the dawn of revival, Kuang Ye's spirit became much better. When he looked at Tiger's Mane, his tone became more determined. "Then I will have to trouble Brother Tiger to convey to the Duke of Loyalty that we thank him for everything he has done for southern Ming. If this matter is successful, it will be a great merit. I will report it to the emperor." Tiger's Mane felt that Kuang Ye's words were sincere. He cupped his fist and said, "I thank Minister for your kind words on behalf of my young master." "Oh yes, my young master also said that once the king of Min really makes a public declaration of war, Minister, please give up on Gaozhou Prefecture for your own safety. Southern Ming should also take this opportunity to recuperate. Once the training of the new army is completed, then it will be time to go south and solve the problem of the king of Min. Before that, it is better not to act rashly. Otherwise, the situation will become very troublesome." Hu Mang's words were a little decisive, and even a little unpleasant to hear. The gist of it was that without the mercenaries here, Kuang Yi and his 1,000 men would not be able to defend Gaozhou Prefecture no matter what. At first glance, it did seem like he was looking down on them, but wasn't this the reality? You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.